will be on shortly. Jenna, I believe now you can hear me. Let me know when we're live.
We are live.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm the Executive Director of the Public Design Commission, and welcome. If you are joining us via Zoom and would like to testify, please sign up through the Google form link shown here and also linked on the meeting agenda. Handing it over to Chair Deborah Martin.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Martin, Chair of the Public Design Commission. Welcome to the Public Design Commission meeting. Today's meeting is being held in person in City Hall. Members of the public can attend and give testimony either in person or remotely. The public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda and items number 28664 to 28677. Please note Commissioner Morgenthau's recusal from item 28677. Are there any other recusals to note? Okay, let the record show there are no other recusals. I will now call for a vote. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote for the consent agenda. Kenseth Armstead.
Approve all.
Isabel Castilla.
Approval.
Lori Hawkinson.
Approval.
Karen Keel.
Approval.
Manuel Miranda.
Approve all.
Susan Morgenthau.
Approval.
Meryl Tisch.
Approval.
Jimmy Van Bramer.
Approve all.
I also approve all. Let the record show all are in favor and the consent agenda is approved. We'll now continue with the public hearing portion of this meeting. The first item is 28678, the preliminary review of the construction of the Walter Gladwin Recreation Center in Walter Gladwin Park at East Tremont Avenue between 3rd Avenue and Arthur Avenue in the Bronx. Per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We'll hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants, and then commissioner comments and questions. We can now proceed with the presentation. Go on. And welcome. Good to see you.
Everyone, my name is Ania Ramirez. I'm an architect at Marble, and we are here to present Walter Gladwin for preliminary review. It's a park, a structure, a rec center located in the Tremont neighborhood of the Bronx, and it's in the eponymous park, Walter Gladwin. Project site from the north, that's the location. And here you can see the main features of the park. Predominantly the entry points of the park, and in red you'll see the footprint of the proposed location of the park. Three main features of the park is the Old Borough Hall that is currently utilized as a great lawn, picnic area, and a playground. One of the big challenges of this project is the rock formation and the topography. And as well, the relationship between the city and the park, not negotiated with the rock formation. As we mentioned before, and by the way, we were here relatively recent, so I think you have it fresh in your memory, but it is worth going through the things one more time. Principles and project goals is integrate the project to the nature and the city, create a place that is safe and intuitive to arrive, human and warm for everyone, equitable design always in the top of our mind, and you will see that through the project. And last but not least, to connect and create us as a community that is intergenerational. A little bit of the program, which is predominantly fitness and sports. And here we're going to start talking a little bit about the massing decisions. The program, because of the topography and the relationship to the different elements on the site, we decided to divide it in 3 pieces that respond to the lawn, to the park, and to the city. And as I mentioned before, it is very important for us to create a relationship between the city and the park, which is allowing us to organize the program as well. Some of the principles of our massing moves, which is organizing volumes, reacting to the site, opening the views, and unifying the elements. As it is a challenging topography, we work with models, and here's a model that you saw on the last time doing conceptual. Better understand how it sits on the site. So as we were here relatively recently, not a lot of the project has changed. There has been some adjustments on the site approach. The landscape architect of our team, Yadiel Rivera, will be talking about those later on. In terms of the interior, there hasn't been big changes other than refine the circulation of the interior with the addition of a second elevator for making sure that there's always access for everyone on the site, and further refinement of the articulation of the fenestrations, which you will see later on in the presentation as well. On the roof, there was a little bit of evolution. Now we are approaching the roof with photovoltaic panels to create, to make a point to the city as it's at the forefront of that technology, and is going to be supplying to the rec center. Yes. Yes. You can see here that what we were attempting to do is take advantage of one of the material of the project, the structure, which is mass timber. It creates some openings, some big gaps that we try to then utilize to conceal some of the mechanical. And you can see here the angles of the roof. A little bit more evolved. Now we are showing the structure. So this is where we were before, and this is where we are today. Today we are presenting some of the materiality evolution of the project, as well as the articulation of the openings, which was a conversation that we had at that point, and the solar array on the roof. Additionally, a comment was made about the signage and wayfinding, and we're going to be presenting that at the very end, but you can start to see it here and in the renderings. So as I started mentioning, the site has a very prominent rock formation, which has been one of the challenges from the very beginning that the city has, had kept us very aware of. And we have taken this as an opportunity, as well as acknowledging the vegetation and the age of the park. This is one of the 5 legacy parks of the Bronx. So we've always been very careful of embracing and acknowledging that. So there was a little bit of a conversation on what the materiality of the project should be, and we have decided alongside with our client to pursue brick at a larger format. This is what you have in your hand. We had a little bit of a challenge bringing it through security, but finally made it. With a few smiles, it's here. And as you can see here, we're trying to evoke the rock formation, how it transitions from a release, transition, and anchor, which are terms of the the formation of rocks through time. And we are pursuing something similar in our striations, articulations, and recesses. You can see here further examples of how that brick will react and behave accordingly. We have selected a lighter palette, but we think that with the color, the body of the brick will complement the metal that we are selecting for the windows, the signage, and the spandrel that is complementary to the vegetation. We also, by happenstance, we were looking at our brick outside, and a leaf just fell off of one of the trees nearby our office, and we realized that the warmth of the fall leaves was going to be our inspiration for the metal. Originally, we had something more on the brass end of things, but we decided to go on a warmer and more popping. In here, we have some updated design renderings. And I know that the commission had some comments on the entry points on the wall, which my colleague here will be addressing. Yes. Yep.
So where's the street?
The street is here. So you're looking at it from the north. It is.
Oh, there it is, I see it.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
So the different elements here, this is from the Great Lawn. You can see that opening there. For the picnic area. A dusk, which is very important to keep security on the park and have the project be a beacon. This would be the entry point of the park, which is now going to celebrate it with a building.
Is that color, is that color?
Yes,
You're rendering the shadow.
as much as an image can. Yeah, the screen is a little bit tricky, but you do have the presentation with you, so you can look at it on different monitors. We are very conscious of our site, so we are here presenting also the views of before and after, before and proposed. So the brick that we're utilizing, as you see, is a longer, very long format, and that's on purpose to really highlight the striation and articulation in a way that not all projects are doing. And as I mentioned before, we are doing mass timber as the structure.
So in the rendering, it looks like there's different, you're gonna go into the details, right? It looks like there's a different detail in the rendering. It looks like it's.
So it's 14 is the color.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, they are. The brick is popping out.
Yeah, you can see it in this. We are currently working in make it more pronounced.
You're doing different kinds of course.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Popping.
And that with the articulation and the brick coursing should highlight a differentiation between the different pieces. So we are preliminary today, and one of the very nice things about designing a project in the park is the relationship between the landscape and the building, which we have been very careful to balance. I'm gonna let my colleague, landscape architect, take care of this portion.
All right. Sit forward. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Anya. Like Anya has been mentioning before, it's been very important for us to, that this project this building that will sit in a park, really speak into it. And very early on, obviously, one of the first considerations is, the existence of trees and trying to, obviously, the placement of the building, which is in this zone, requires that a lot of them are taken down, but we're preserving as much of the character around it, because I think that will help ground the building. And then sort of expanding on the diagram of the sort of the 3 volumes that the architecture side presented, we are also sort of thinking about those 3 in very distinct ways. So the way that the building approaches the urban fabric on the Tremont side, and that as a very welcoming plaza that takes you into the building. And then the part that faces the interior of the park, closer to the center, it's meant to be more of a sort of quieter, calmer space that maybe has a different scale than the urban plaza. And then obviously the building also frames the existing event lawn where the old Borough Hall used to be. So here's a few features of the landscape. We are sort of staying as close as we can to the building in terms of our intervention, but there's a couple of key moments that we wanted to also address. The main entrance to the building and the crossing from across the street is important, not only for entering the building, but also as a main entrance to the park. So we wanted to make sure that that feels like a cohesive experience. Accessibility. So as you maybe saw before, we are actually adding a new ADA access towards the lawn, because it's a great change from here, the Great Lawn and the picnic area. So we want to make sure that everyone has, as close to equal access as possible, and that experience is not only for people that use wheelchair, but actually anyone can take that pathway. We prefer to take that pathway because it's a nice experience. And then closer to the building here in the back, it's a little bit of an area of respite, closer to being enclosed in the park environment and nature. So it offers a variety of areas for people to sit. So just expanding a little bit on the questions that were brought up. There's a couple of reasons. One is that we want that space to feel like you can actually step aside, sit, talk to someone, and just not feel like you're part of a circulation. So then there is an area to be and an area to access, right? The other reason is that the existing topography of the site is a little higher than the finished elevation of the building. So we do have to actually slightly slope down up to here. And then we're also trying to slope down from the building out. So we're creating these planter areas and trying to guide water towards them so that it doesn't affect the building. In terms of materials, and I'm gonna talk about 2 of them specifically, pavement material, and then the sort of rock wall at the front. The way that we sort of came up with the paving pattern on the entry plaza and the park facing plaza, basically is an offset of what exists today at the center. So the center is the one place in the park that has unit paving. The rest of the pathways are asphalt. So you see darker gray here. And so it sort of indicates an important moment in the park. And so we want to extend that sort of importance into the areas of entry to the new rec center. So sort of pointing that this is an important area, as well as now the entry to the building and the access in the back. So basically it's a reverberation, it's an echo of what's there today. And if you can see, there is a hexagonal pavement at the center, but as you move to the edges, it becomes bands of rectilinear pavers, and that's what we're intending to use at the plaza, both plazas. A lot of furnishing and sort of seating opportunities, and especially a variety of seating opportunities in the back for encouraging social interaction. Good safety lighting throughout the park. So, we sort of increase and build upon what's there. Furnishing palette. We're using park standards in terms of benches and expanding on what exists there today and what their sort of legacy park requirements are. And we're adding sort of this element of boulders that are starting to play with the idea that there's this existing rock formation that the building sort of inspire on, and that the landscape is sort of that transition moment between the two. A lot of canopy trees, as well as ornamental trees, that we are expanding the palette of the trees that exist there today, and creating moments of color, especially in the back by the lawn area. and then a palette of shrubs and forbs and all the ground covers that will primarily happen in the planted areas immediately surrounding the building. And the only area where we're sort of expanding this sort of more dense planting is by the accessible ramp experience. So a couple of views here on the entrance. This is sort of similar to a rendering that you saw before. And we can probably go back to one of them after to just talk a little bit more about the wall. But we did slight modification in terms of the selection of the material that we wanted to use. We want to use stone. There's an existing stone wall there that is more sort of like unit pieces of stone. What we're trying to do is sort of use a material and a color that sort of that is already present in that wall, but in a different way, right? So this is not trying to recreate the wall. This is meant to be a new feature, and one that again transitions between the existing and the building. So we are using a lighter tone of stone, and that's different from the previous rendering that we submitted. We were sort of lagging behind on like the selection of the brick, and we think that a lighter tone will do better in terms of combining the two. So a couple of views of the space in the back. You see how it's smaller scale, different type of experience. This is a view from that accessible pathway with a little bit more of a dense type of planting instead of just lawn, like what happens in the rest of the park. And in this area, we're also adding new trees. Here's the overall plan again. And I'm going to pass it on to Anya so that she can talk about the two last things.
Yes, to quickly wrap it up, currently the project has Person for Art assigned to it, but due to the accelerated schedule, it's going to be happening during construction. So when we issue our drawings, we're then going to go through the process of selecting an artist and integrating. But we wanted to show you the different possibilities for art in the different forms, either freestanding, ceiling suspended, or wall applied. And last but not least, signage. We're choosing a protruding metal to match our windows and metal, and utilizing park standards to create the signage of the building to be visible and at different scales. As Yadiel was mentioning, the southern piece of the project is more of a place of respite, so the signage is smaller. We're facing a street, a high traffic street, so we're going a little bit bolder on the front side. And if anyone has any questions, we can have the conversation now.
I just wanted to see if there was any testimony prior to that. Jenna, do we have any remote testimony?
There are no people signed up to testify online. Is anyone in the Zoom room here to testify? If so, please use the raise hand feature. Thank you. I see none.
Thank you, Jenna. I also don't see anybody in person, and nobody's signed up. So we can move on to discussion and questions. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions or comments?
I just want to ask about that. Thank you. All very much great. I think the concept to the final proposal here, there's a lot of, it's very clear in terms of what you're doing. And I think it's a very handsome building. I just had a detailed question about that metal over there. So which, did you pick one that you're proposing? You had two of them. This is the one.
Yes, that's the one.
This is the one that's going, so that goes, is that at the trim on the top?
It's all on the metal. We're currently
All the metal
proposing
is the
to use
same and the windows
Yes.
are all painted. And then that back panel that we're seeing through the glass.
Here,
there, and yeah,
that is mass timber.
that's your mass timber?
Yes.
Mhm. Okay.
So we are letting it be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very challenging detail, but we're working through it to reveal it.
Can you point to
That's
that?
my
Anya?
favorite. That's my favorite part, the revealing of the structure of the mass timber.
There we go. Okay, thank you.
I like first, I'd say we've made a lot of comments about how you are going to treat how you were going to treat surfaces and how you were going to deal with the way that the mass is connected. And I have to say, I'm pleased with the way that light travels through the building during daylight. And I'm really pleased with the human scale of the glass entryways with the metal work. And I think that the complementary nature between the mass timber and the metal work, all I can say is that it feels like it feels of a human scale, and it feels inviting. And one of the dangers that I was worried about before is that the heaviness of the darker tones you were using was foreboding, like it was, and now it feels like a much more open space. And I like the striations. There's almost too much regularness to the lined striation of the way you're using the brick, because obviously in the natural formation, there's more inconsistency. And in some way, I want to see that. I want to see some discontinuity between the way that they all line up, and that is unnatural. But I can't say I'm bothered by that, but I understand the inspiration of it, and I think that could be, adjusted for both emotional and visual impact.
You mean the facade?
On the facade, where the striations are mimicking the striations are mimicking the sedimentary stone, and sedimentary stone isn't regular. So the irregularity of the sedimentary stone, as opposed to the regularity of how you're mimicking it, there's an area for expression between those two.
That's a good comment. I mean, the reality is that these volumes are separate.
Yeah.
So there might be an opportunity to create some.
Balance, unbalance. Balance, imbalance, and figure out where you want, like, it's like a tension squeeze, and there's a place for it to be dramatic or a place for it to be calming.
Just. You have graphics up.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the final, this, I would just pretend. I wanted to ask, but I did want to ask about the art placement.
Yes.
So this seems kind of traditional. So it seems like you're, I don't know, the process piece here in front, and there's, I mean, I would just urge you to give your artist a little free rein, right? I mean, I know they think there's always like ready to go or their services, but I also think that we should be
Yeah, boulders.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I agree.
we totally agree with you. At this point, due to the timeline not aligning, what we typically love to do is just integrate it, like be part of the design process. I think we're talking to the DDC to see how we can bring someone like sooner to start those conversations, because we do want to allow for that to happen within the framework of the city and the logistics of the contract and all of that. But yes, absolutely.
Design build challenge.
But this is design bid build. It's just the timeline.
Design build the challenge.
The timeline in this case, our schedule, we're trying to do the project in a shorter timeline, design timeline. So that's the reason.
So the sites you identified, Anya, they're not meant to limit the artist, if I'm understanding you correctly. They're just sort of, you're presenting possibilities, but should the artist say, actually, what I want to do is something else or somewhere else, your team, and I'm including the DPR in that, would be open to that consideration?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, there are more on the traditional side of location.
Right, so I have a couple of comments and suggestions. Thank you for the presentation. Since we're talking about art, these were not part of my comments, but just thinking about it now, I think that curvilinear ramp, the trajectory through it could be a great opportunity for art that maybe is composed of various pieces as opposed to one static one, because it's a way to animate that space and actually have a more exciting journey, just putting it out there. But overall, in terms of my comments on the material selection, I do think the building has come a long way, and I really appreciate the carefulness of the material selection, how it speaks to the geology of the site without being forced. It's kind of a interpretation that feels like the right balance. And I think it also creates a very unique building in the project and really allows the mass timber to come out, especially in those night renderings, which I think is very successful. In terms of the landscape, I think you have clarified a lot of the comments that we had, especially understanding now how that terrace is formed. The comments were because there was a plan that wasn't really clear, but now understood what your intention is. And I know landscape always, it's a little bit behind in terms of material and intention than the architecture because you're responding to it. But I would like to understand a little bit more your selection of stone, because the way your renderings express the design, I understand there's 3 types of stone. There's a stone wall that fronts Tremont Street. There is the sitting boulders, which I think are very exciting and successful. But your renderings also show some more kind of boulder outcroppings that mitigate some of the site changes in elevation that are not clearly highlighted on the presentation.
Yeah.
But to me, that's one of the most successful parts. How can you introduce more natural boulders that almost feel like they were there, even though obviously they were not because of the building construction, and how those may morph into more architectural pieces that compose the stone walls and the sitting boulders? And I guess my question to you is, are they all coming from the same quarry? And are you just using different shapes and finishes to push them and pull them between architectural and more naturalistic?
The idea scenario will be that they come from the same quarry, but if not, they will be selected so that they are like complementary to each other. I can see the boulders, the sort of more loose boulders having maybe more variation in color, but like if we're using the lighter tone as a more integral color for the wall, then that lighter color shows up in the boulders like prominently as well, right? So it's trying to create that transition. And I think, yeah, the loose boulders are basically trying to do what you were saying, right? This is a site that has a very strong rock formation, that outcropping that comes out of the site. And basically what it's doing is sort of telling that story. And I agree. I mean, it's still going to be designed and placed, accordingly. It's not going to happen naturally, although maybe there's an opportunity once excavation happens to discover that there's a location where we can keep it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would just be more interested to see, as you explore the boulders, what exactly is the final selection as it relates to the facade, because New York State and kind of more Northeast tends to be darker stone, unless you do marble, but marble wouldn't seem appropriate here. So I'm just interested to know how you land on the right kind of stone. And then lastly, I think this ramp environment is also a great opportunity to maybe do more boulders than you're showing on the plan. I think there's an intention there, but if you really want to ground it and make it feel like a geological kind of relationship, I think more of a combination of the naturalistic boulders with the sitting boulders would really ground it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. Thank you.
I think the signage locations generally seem fine in the hierarchy. One thing, the street side sign, it feels a little large to me. And I know this is just a kind of probably preliminary sketch, but it's like 12 feet tall, which is like higher than this room. And that street is, the width is, maybe, is it 4 lanes or 2 lanes?
No, it is more. It is quite a wide street. It might not be depicted as prominently here, but I believe it's 4 lanes and 2 parking, not to park, but parking areas. So it's on the wide side.
So I think just the height that it's at now, it's kind of at a pedestrian height, the text. But typically like a larger sign for a street might be higher, which, you don't necessarily have to do, but I think at that height, when you're standing next to it, it's going to feel large. It's, it's like higher than this like sill here. So So I just think of like, do a scale test or something.
Yeah,
like that.
actually, that's what we typically do, and we haven't done it yet, is to do a little bit of a virtual walkthrough in our model to see how it feels and right size it. So absolutely, we'll take that into account, because we might be reacting graphically to the elevation and not necessarily spatially at this moment.
Just to piggyback on that idea and to my colleagues' ideas about, are there finalists already for doing the artwork for this?
No.
Okay. But I would say when there are finalists to actually state that you are open to all spaces and aspects of the building, will diversify, because artists are really sensitive. They don't want to step on your toes. But if you say that you want to collaborate with the artists, then you're going to get broader, appeal from them about how it is that they can collaborate in the space with you. So, and that's something I think a lot of architects, they're designating spaces and artists feel like they will respect that.
Yeah.
You know, so if you want them to give you something that encompasses the building or how it is the building approaches this 4 lanes, then you have to kind of state it in your appeal to the finalists who are selected. And then beyond that, I just want to say, I love the idea of these boulder seating. I just love them. All right, that's it. That's all.
Is the
Thank
park
you.
sign applied, that big leaf thing?
Yes,
It's too bad it can't be in the brick.
I know.
Yeah.
We'll think about it. Well, I mean, obviously there is it's a lot of effort in the back, pulling the brick in and out. There are ways to water jet the bricks, but then it would be a little bit more challenging, and then the logo would be a little bit more blocky, like pixelated. So that's why we decided to go this route.
Can you talk a little bit about access from the event lawn to the building? Because I know you said that there was no access to the second floor of the building, but
Yes.
go through.
So if you don't mind, I think it's better to show it in the model. So you have a sense of the challenge here. If you see here, right, you see that there is a big change in topography. Our building is only 2 stories. So when you're here at the lawn, you are at the second floor, right? And the second floor is mostly dance and classroom spaces. So it's a little bit more private activity, more independent, versus the ground, which has more sports and the gym and more fitness. So the challenge would be here to try to come to a more independent, individual, quieter program through the lawn, which sort of I don't want to say it's the back, because there's really no back in this project, but it's a little bit more of the intimate program of the project. So it would be a little bit disruptive to come through that. And obviously that would require some person to be there during work hours. And we are trying to be smart with our resources in terms of the public dollars.
Let's put like a private space in the back now.
Well, there's always going to be visual access, so it doesn't feel like the back of the building. That obviously we want to remove that possibility. We want to keep a project that this building is in a location because we think that this will act as a beacon for the park, and it will create a sense of security. So we want to make sure that there's really no corner that you feel insecure or worried of crossing a certain hour. So obviously with the use of lighting and our windows, really looking at the outside, we're hoping that feeling will go away.
Commissioners,
We're on the event lawn for an event, and I'm
Thank you. And I'm in a wheelchair or I have difficulty walking. How would I get from the event lawn into the building to use a restroom, for example?
So our understanding is that whenever there is a large event, not the daily, but a large event, there will be bathroom facilities at this level.
So they're not going to.
So you don't necessarily have to go all the way down. There will be something here in place. But if you do, because you happen to be on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. there, and it's just doing your own thing, you can go through the ramp that the landscape team has designed and go through this door here.
So can you show that path just with your finger?
If you.
Yeah,
I can
so-
put in the slide 21.
So, yeah.
We're looking at here, might be.
So the ADA access ramp or the ramp that, which is actually a slope plane because it's not less than 5% slope.
I see.
It goes sort of zigzags around, and the idea is that it actually directs you into this entrance right
It's a
here.
long journey.
It is, which it used to be also, a lot of people maybe, on an event day will, able people will go up the stairs here, but the majority of people have to come from here and then climb all the way to the lawn, which, more or less where the building is today. So what we're doing is, trying to create that as a contiguous experience up.
Thank you.
And how often do you expect programming on the lawn? It's not going to be an everyday thing?
No, the programming is typical concerts in the summer. So I don't know exactly how often, but I would say probably weekly on a Saturday, there will be an event here. I think the programming at the parks works very diligently on providing the right things to make sure that there was no hardship being created. The current bathrooms are very far away over here.
Okay, so you're looking at like the porta potty deployment,
Yes.
like no more than once a week.
It's coming once a week.
I'm sorry?
I said no more than once a week.
In
Less
this,
than that?
during the summer, the more often it's going to be
So,
every weekend.
so right now there's only, only 4 events, sorry.
In the summer.
It's only 4 events, or it's only 4 events.
FOR.
When you say 4 events, you mean 4 events of some. Yeah. What do you mean? I mean, will only be brought into the site.
FOR,
Yeah,
during events.
during events.
Thank you, Mike. To those of us who know pronouns or whatever they are. Whatever it needs to be.
Oh,
Yes.
Commissioners, we're in a moment, I'd like to summarize, so if you could. finish
Last
up-
thing,
Yes.
if we could talk about the solar array, is that gonna be connected to batteries? Or will it be taking up, like, I just installed solar and I had to make that choice for my own thing, and I'm curious how it is that you're adjusting, like, why you chose the solar and how much of that will take up the energy usage for the building and whether or not that's gonna be on battery.
Currently, there won't be any batteries. It's gonna be for daily use with the solar hours. But we'll see how things go in the code and the city changes. But right now.
Okay. So I will summarize comments. One area of comments has to do with just giving the artists the freedom to choose a site, which you have agreed. We had a comment about bringing a little bit of a irregularity to the facade and thinking about that, which you will consider. There's similarly a question about the landscape materials and the harmony of the boulders with the other, let's call it like more predefined coloration of those, and just thinking about the integrity of those materials. And then finally, the scale of the signage is a comment. But overall, summarizing that we feel, and we have said this to you before, it's a very elegant solution to what is, as you have noted, a very complex site. There's a lot of strength in the transparency of the building with its uses, the human scale, which is quite inviting, the material choices which support the program. And overall, we think it's a quite successful addition to this community, for this community and for our city as a whole. So we commend that. It's a beautiful structure. So with that, I will call the vote. So this is item 28678. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote. Kenseth Armstead,
Approve.
Isabel Casilla,
Approve.
Lori Hawkinson, Bill Heinzen,
Approve.
Karen Keel, Manuel Miranda,
Approve.
Susan Morgenthau, Merrill Fish, Jimmy Van Rayburn.
Approve.
And I also approve, so let the record show all are in favor and the project is approved. Congratulations. Okay, so moving on to the next item, it is number 28647. Final review of the reconstruction of a portion of a park at Bush Terminal Piers in Brooklyn. And I will give the presenters a moment to come in.
Yeah. You know, Deborah. Guys. Where is Doug? Where is Doug?
Did no one tell Doug? Sorry.
Was he here?
Starting with Gulliver.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Where is he?
Okay.
Doug? Doug? Doug, I need you up front. Good morning, commissioners and members of the public.
Good morning, if we're, hang on one second. Okay, thank you. So this is the hearing on item 28647, the final review of the reconstruction of a park at Bush Terminal Piers in Brooklyn. For standard procedure, applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate and vote. We'll hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. Thank you, and please proceed.
Yes, good morning, commissioners, members of the public. I'm Gail Rothstein from the Economic Development Corporation. As noted, we're here to show the final designs of Steiner Studios in the Maiden, New York campus on the Sunset Park waterfront and Bush Terminal Piers Park. Presenting today are Doug Steiner, Chairman of Steiner Studios, then Gulliver Shepherd of MVVA will present the park, and William Stein of Datner Architects, the studio. Thank you.
It's working. Doug Steiner, Steiner Studios. Hi.
Hi there.
We are here seeking whatever we need to hopefully build a transformational project in Sunset Park as we did in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We started Steiner Studios in the Navy Yard in 1999, opened in 2004. It's 780,000 feet, employs between 3,000 and 4,000 people, and has brought film and television back to New York in a big way. It's a hugely important industry for New York City. About half the workforce does not need a college degree and makes 90,000. It's a union business, union jobs. I'm sorry? We have a CUNY graduate film school on our lot to hopefully make the industry more accessible. And the Brooklyn College Film School is, I think, 50,000 for a master's degree versus 250,000-300,000 for a master's degree, and lots of scholarship money is available. the industry is hugely important to New York City's economic future. It's a great industry that wants to be in New York. Not many manufacturing businesses want to be in here. And we say it's manufacturing for the 21st century. We try to be a good citizen. We try to build an attractive project. And we have our project is laden with community benefits, really of two types. First is $10 million to finish the work in Bush Terminal Pierce Park, which was never done going back many years ago. I think there were some environmental issues. The city ran out of money, and so they finished what they could while doing the cleanup, but they couldn't finish the park. And then the other basket of benefits is ongoing money for programming in the park and for workforce development, hopefully with local residents primarily, through working with local community organizations, Hire NYC, Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, Center for Family Life. We'd like to start a CTE to bring people in from the high school level. There's one in Queens, there's nothing in Brooklyn. And all kinds of funding on an annual basis for MOAM for DEI program, for the park for programming every year, $25,000 a year, $50,000 for MOAM, $5,000 for the South Brooklyn Industrial Development Corporation for workforce development, and the Made in New York program with MOAM is with Brooklyn Workforce Innovations. I'm forgetting a few other things, but we want to try to do the right thing. We're very active in Brooklyn civic life and the arts. And the most important thing here is jobs in a good industry with union jobs and a bright future that wants to be here, that can thrive here. And I think we can have a tremendous positive impact on Sunset Park. And our project is on EDC land, which brings with it, you know, people have a lot of issues with EDC in the greater scope. We don't want to be collateral damage in that regard. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Hi, is this for recording or can I do this? Okay, then I'll juggle here. My name is Gulliver Shepherd. I'm with a partner with Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. This is kind of a really rewarding kind of project because the story of being able to update and utilize a site that's industrial and not really seeing the best of days right now, plus address a park that is loved already by the community and update it to their needs today. Again, as Doug said, it was incomplete for nearly a decade, and there's still a mental list in the community about what they want. We know this because in early 2021, we started with a listening session with the Community District 7 and just opened the doors about what's important about this park to this community. What do they love? What didn't happen that they're still hoping for, and how has that changed over time? So since that listening session, we've also gone back to them many times and worked with New York Parks Department on updating the park, not just from the community's needs, but also the needs of an expanding park system that has to be very conscious of maintenance and operations. So it's in Brooklyn, as you already know, a rather significant piece of waterfront facing the harbor, but you would never know that from the approach from the city. It's kind of a hidden gem, and it's, I think, part of why the community loves it so much. It's a little rough around the edges. And when you kind of approach from these kind of snorkels to get to the space, this wonderfully large topographic park, it's a tremendous surprise in the context of all this kind of underutilized industrial area. So we're going to go to this. So the task, a lot of the hard work was, of course, done with, as Doug mentioned, with remediating and capping the soils. And so there's three core areas of work that we have endeavored to do. The blue area, which has literally been fenced off from the community, which is entirely frustrating in that it is your access to the water. So just to complete that, even though the fields are quite loved and address, you know, those older children, there was still a desire, as promised in the original design, for a play area. So we're bringing to the community a play hill, and there was a very robust conversation with the community. And then lastly, sorry, that's in yellow. And then in the pink magenta color is the float bridge site, which was just about creating the ergonomics of a park entry where you can't see the park. Let's see some of this. So since the preliminary submission, what's really changed are, other than kind of what we'll walk through, are small changes just in any design process to make it a little better, a little more tailored to what the input that we received over the time, talking to the community and very much the Parks Department, but also the constructability. And a lot of these changes you see circled here are really about what you could do on the site relative to kind of bulkheads and connecting to existing pathways and utility work. See the condition of the site. As we zoom in here, this is the first of the 3 areas, just the phase 2 area. And again, as I mentioned, the South Sports Field is quite utilized, and people do bike through there and that around that corner to the lower left. Or what we've changed is that was a rather blind corner and kind of a 90-degree turn. And it's never great for entering a park and not being able to see where you're going, just for the psychological safety aspect. And then, of course, opening up on the west and south edge, all of this waterfront. You'll often find people going places where they're not supposed to be to try to get those views to the waterfront edge. And now we're providing it in spades. Zooming into that, again, with extensive conversations with the Parks Department about how to maintain that, we've created a kind of a matrix or a constellation of places for people. Picnic benches, traditional parks benches, and a kind of seat, which you'll see a photo of later, that's in the park of just these stone slab seats that people enjoy just crawling up on rocks. So a mix of seating types is always great for a public space. We are continuing the asphalt paths throughout the park, but where we're showing the picnic areas, they're in that kind of beige color. We are using exposed aggregate at the recommendation of the Parks Department for cleaning the kind of messes that food brings along. We've also had to originally begin this design only using existing light pole locations, but we have since updated that for obviously safety and just a general, that's been a request to update that. So, okay. And I guess I would say there's also, and you'll see this, there's a kind of theme in the park of these little hummocks or mounds that people, like kids jump up or run up to the top of, kind of a king of the hill thing, and it changes your view on the waterfront. So we think that this meander of paths provides just a wonderful interface for people to enjoy the waterfront. On the inboard side, where at the edge of the Steiner Sequel project site, we are extending what's already there, which is a linear walkway full of a promenade of benches and trees and lights, and then a bikeway connection, and then a buffering landscape, which we'll talk about later. Again, the changes of limit of work, what had to do with a emergency access way, and adding more seating and the ergonomics of that connection to the float bridge site in the left, and just the organization and choreography of the streetscapes, companion seating for accessible needs, and waste receptacles. And this is all built on top of capped, which we don't disturb in all this work. The next section is the play hill. This was actually a really exciting conversation with the community because it had a challenge, which was there wasn't a lot of flat spaces to put a playground in. But then we also came to the realization that one of the premier experiences of the park was running up this, 20-foot hill and gaining great views of the harbor, but that was not accessible. So we combined the two ideas of bringing an accessible walk up to a playground that's nested between those little topographic hummocks, those little hills, and to have the best of both worlds. So this is some views of the site. You can see on the right image examples of that stone seating that's all over the site that we're reclaiming, reusing, or not disturbing. Here are those hummocks, and kind of wild, rough around the edges quality that the community loves about this park. So the changes here again were just very detailed revisions, which I'll walk through some, particularly working with the Parks Department on their accessibility specialists and the community, which were very vocal about to make sure that the children with disabilities were integrated well into this. And then again, the limit of work connecting to existing paths, providing at all these opportunities, new places to sit, since people were used to using stone seats and informal edges. And within the park, there's a great deal of accommodation of seats for caregivers, companion seating, and access into the lawns. So after you have the play with the equipment, you can still run out on the lawn hills. So like many playgrounds that you must oversee, there's the required separation of ages, 5 to 12 and 2 to 5. They're delineated with the paving types. And the big changes here are really just, again, refinements to edges, getting as much out of the edges of this. And I'll show you a section to kind of explain some of that, how to set this in, provide shade for the play area, comfortable seating areas, some in shade, some in sun, and provide lighting. Again, you can see how it's tucked down into this sort of valley on hilltop valley kind of relationship. And there's a small curb that surrounds the whole thing just to get the planting up higher and provide more shade into the park. Sorry, I went too far. There we go. So you can get the relationship there in a little more detail about people being able to still run around in the lawns, but in this sign of life and activity of the playground animates the park that is often empty, but at the same time loved. Relative to the play equipment, we've worked with some of the preferred manufacturers at the Parks Department to really get something that they can take care of. The worst thing to experience in a playground is play equipment that's falling apart. And it's a lot of, so one of the big changes is to actually invest in a real stainless steel slide. Those are quite expensive, but it was something that was really aspired for with this park, to have a high quality collection. And again, it's just a linear run of a lot of interface for kids with disabilities and those without, all mixed in. You can see there's a ramp that brings you up and elevates you from this valley position to then also see the hills that surround the playground. And we're using standard safety surface tiles very much because of the maintenance needs of the park. And then the younger kids' age, again, a similar concept of creating a little ramps and places to get in and under and crawl around. Again, we just want to emphasize with this view that this was not an accessible experience, and we're bringing that with the addition of the playground, which we're very excited about. Okay, so this is the third area, the float bridge site, which again is just about getting a better way into this wonderful park. You can see the site conditions, that 90-degree turn on the right. You can see how you were surrounded by walls and fences and chain link fences, and you couldn't see where you were going on that image on the right. And what we're doing here is attending to much requested parking for the park, creating a separate secured entry for the bikeway, potential for city bike location, and some planting just to mark and a sign for marking the entrance. And you can see the idea of this trajectory is, instead of corners, you get to slow bend that's aligned with trembling aspen, just a really robust kind of animated canopy that can kind of shield some of the industrial thing. And then we open up windows to some of the to look through as you move through this curved walk. Again, since preliminary design, just refinements of integrating some stone seating, tweaking number of parking spaces, and bike parking and access through here. The big note here is that we are continuing to work with the Port Authority on this site. very standard Parks Department equipment. It was a very strongly requested desire because this is a significant park and has a lot of maintenance draw for them. We are also, there's the site, one of the advantages of working on both the Steiner Sequel site and this site is there's a large amount of Belgian block to reclaim and use into the park. So we've done that throughout the park at edges of the playground and entrances. And again, the planting is really taking cues from the existing park, what's there, the kind of wild character that the community has enjoyed for years and doesn't want it to be too different. Where it gets maybe different is just at the idea of creating thicker buffers at the eastern edge along the Sequel site. But then also diversity, that this is we always are tooting the horn with the Parks Department. We're right there with them about making this a resilient site and creating layers of planting, tree canopy, shrubs, ground covers to create a lot of interest over the course of the years. And I guess in summary, the end. I took your slide, Doug, sorry. But in summary, it's been a great pleasure to be able to update a park that's just loved and to their current needs and to realize a waterfront park project and to be able to do that within the needs of the Parks Department maintenance and standards. Of course. Oh. Oh, so sorry. Yes, this whole blue area is fenced off. So all this edge, you can see from various vantage points, so you cannot actually walk up to the edge at all. And what happens is this naturalized area, you're actually not, it's fenced off intentionally. So people are not supposed to be there. And people are crawling out on riprap, kind of dodgy, not accessible situations in order to just take purchase of this amazing harbor view. And then of course there is the 1,000-foot walk at the tidal pond, but that is a commitment and it only is one part of the view. So I apologize for not making that clear. You can see from the hill, but you're also looking into the back of a lot of canopy.
So before we have more commissioner questions and comments, do we have any public testimony?
We do not have any in-person testimony. Jenna, do we have any remote testimony?
Hi, there's no one signed up to testify on the park specifically. If anyone in the Zoom room is here to testify on this project, please use the raise hand feature. I'll give you a second. I see no testimony on this online. Thanks.
Okay, we can continue with the discussion.
Okay, commissioners, any other questions or comments? A question around the signage, is that right?
Yeah, there was that big sign. Where do we stand on the big sign? That was just a question, because that's not part of this.
That's not part of this item. It's the next
Okay.
item.
Right.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Gulliver, can you talk a little bit about the float bridge, the pedestrian circulation? Like if I'm arriving by subway, let's say, or from the neighborhood, what's my path out to the beautiful places now that I can go to see the view?
So if you're coming from the subway and you're coming west on, say, 50th Street, you would cross the street at the intersection and you'd see a path here. There's an entry to Steiner Sequel that's over here. So it's definitely, you'll see that in a moment. But there's a signage and this kind of visual symbol of a big bosque of trees and hopefully some city bikes that kind of cue you up for that. But it's about having a straight view deep into the site from that intersection. See that angle instead of what you had before is you were always looking through layers of chain link fence. Now we're having a straight view into that. Again, as If you're driving, we're not encouraging that, but very close to that same location, you can drive in and there's a limited number of spots, but it was just people with small kids really were vocal about that as well. And it's also useful for the Port Authority because they need to be able to have access to the rest of the site that's not available to the public. And that we're creating this corridor planted with canopy trees that just unfolds and has little gaps in it so you can see the coming of the water. And then finally you come to the corner where the fence line has been chamfered and you are allowed to see a deep view as you turn the bend right here into the topographic part of the project.
Thank you. Now, are there restrooms in this park?
There are existing restrooms. That's actually quite a nice comfort station, actually, made out of shipping containers, and it's a nice, it's quite decent.
Oh, okay, I see it marked there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's right at the center of the park, so it's
Yeah.
convenient. Well, that was an important part of why the play program, as some know, that bathroom's important for that.
One question, I know this is Manuel's territory, the Parks Department signage, because I think this sounds so fantastic. The park is so beautiful. I'm so excited about it. But we're all just like, how do we get there? You know, it's an inside baseball thing. So
Yeah,
is there one of those big leaves, you know, right there on First Avenue, or how do I know where I'm going?
well, there's an existing, quite a lot of pieces in right there. And yes, I think there's a standard parks.
Standard parks
on
thing
Fifth
out there.
Avenue.
If you
Yeah.
find it out there.
Planner here. Get back to you. Yeah, okay. Port Authority, yeah,
Or you're the Port Authority?
yeah,
Parks, okay.
that's right.
On the fence or something? You have a fence there, though, yeah.
Do we have anyone from Parks who could answer that question?
You just did.
Hi, I'm Chris Surratt from Parks Capital. I'm not sure we're going to have fencing there because that's not Parks property. That section, it's owned by the Port Authority.
Oh, okay.
So actually, the whole site is not Parks property. It's EDC property, but we manage it. So we have the signage, as Gulliver said, on the other northern entrance, but we will not have signs.
So who would be responsible for placing signage there? Would it be the Port Authority?
That's a good question. I don't think we've gone through that yet, but perhaps Steiner could provide signs at that location.
Yeah.
I looked at both of the Steiner Studio sequel and then the park. They're two separate things, but they're not. They're one thing. And what is most apparent to me, having been an artist who had a studio like 3 blocks from there, is that people don't know, won't know. And it's going to get worse when you put Steiner Studios between them and the park. And there seem to be natural means of egress directly through Steiner Studios, but it's designed almost like a fort. And I'm not saying that you have to do that, but it would seem that the best and easiest, most efficacious way to let people know it's there is in the central path to the park, where like right now, there's not a site that can be overseen and make a means of egress. You could actually make a means of egress through the center if you wanted.
Nothing would make me happier than to not have a rail yard in front of our lot,
Yeah.
but it's an active rail yard between us and First Avenue. So we can't have people crossing that, and it's a controlled access at that southern entrance that we're showing. Secondly,
Not a walking bridge.
huge distance, just not practical. The other thing I would mention is, as an active movie studio, you just can't go through movie studios. They live on intellectual property. The secrecy that they need and the privacy that they need is critical to their mission. That's how they make their money. And the public doesn't get to go into a working lot Where there are public tours of lots in LA, that's a very controlled experience, but it's still through controlled access. And we do not have that component here.
I'm definitely very sensitive to the former, but not the latter. Not that the latter isn't important. It is, of course, to be taken note of, but the former seems to be a bigger challenge in my, like, to construe how to get people better access to this park, which you're putting a lot of effort into making a better park. That's my main concern. So I hear those two concerns, and obviously I said the former rather than the latter more important to me, and certainly to the public in general. But I do think it will be lost on people when they are encountered with it. Will seem like a private park as opposed to a public park.
Well, I think EDC is doing a lot of work up here to open this up and make it a very public area. And I think that will change the character of the approach to that park. And I also think right now you're looking through a really unsightly rail yard to some very dilapidated buildings. And I think as we put in, we're paying a lot of extra money to have brick buildings. We wanted brick as the aesthetic. As they see into an attractive lot, it's a different view than right now across this railroad crap and buildings that are just, look imposing and as an obstacle rather than the two flanking entrances, which while we can't add an entrance between them, we are improving at both ends, and the promenade's quite nice.
I appreciate your technical language. And also, I just want to feel like, there's a lot of branding and sign space for Steiner, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But when it overshadows the public good, then it can be an impediment. People don't feel like they feel comfortable on someone else's lawn, right? So how do you, and this is something that we're all going to have to negotiate together. And obviously the park is looking like a great experience overall, but like how to get more people to navigate it as you're making it a better site for more people and you're increasing the square footage. I'm not sure that I'm there yet. And I really want to feel comfortable about that. I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
I have a similar question, or maybe a possible solution. Like, you must be working very closely with the Port Authority in every aspect of this. What influence could you have on the identification of that entrance?
I didn't even know of this park until we got involved in this project. It is a hidden gem. I am open to working to get a good sign on the Port Authority land that will make, clear where the entrance is and make it more than a small sign. I don't know what Parks has as standards, but I'm happy to try to make that more visible and inviting. And, it's a good thing. I wanted to have I got shot down by EDC, but we were hoping to have a turnstile into the park for people in the lot just to use it. But that got shut down pretty hard.
What do you think about the idea of having some signage on your structure that would identify this way to the park kind of thing?
I think it's a little bit, I don't think it goes, but I think a good sign. And I would say at both the south end and the north end, perpendicular to the street so that people can see it when they're riding or walking is the way to go. And I'm all for, it's a good thing. I'm good for it.
So just to say back to you what you just said about that between 50th and 51st, you would agree that there should be really clear identification of the park there, and you will work with Port Authority.
We don't have any land. We don't control anything up here. I think that we would
Right, no,
work
I'm
with
talking-
EDC for something here at First Avenue.
Right.
And over here, we will work with the Port Authority to get some prominent signage. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what all the commissioners said. And just to give you an example or analogy, when throughout New York City, developers are required to build publicly accessible plazas or open spaces known as POPs from city planning, they all have a sign. And that sign needs to be on every single entry of that space because those spaces are usually abutted to a building. And even though they're intended to be publicly accessible, the public doesn't always read them as such. And I think that is the same concern here. it's a hidden gem and it's great for those neighbors, but with all of this investment, you do want more people to be able to use it. And the access points seem not very clear. I also find them to be very elongated, especially the parking lot. I know that's the only place you can put a parking lot, but when you go to a park with a lot of little kids, that long walk to get to the playground is quite onerous, right? And especially you might not be able to do much about it, but at least being able to create entrances that are very clear and inviting, I think is a step in the right direction to invite the local community. I have additional comments. I wasn't part of the previous reviews. I'm newer commissioner here. And I am a little bit unclear about the relationship of the South Sports Field to the picnic area. Can you walk me through it? Like, is there a fence separating them?
Before you go there, I just want to say the part of the reason we put the playgrounds at the north end was for proximity to the comfort stations. Anyone with little kids knows, huge. And that playground is close to the north entrance as well. And I'll let Gulliver respond to the other part.
Well, the South Sports Field is for softball, baseball. I don't know exactly which, or both. But so you do have fencing around that to stop the balls from impeding on people's experience, and also to accommodate like teams and areas on the flat sides. So currently that fence is paired up with a series of chain link fences that cut off access altogether. So that would all come down. You'd still have the fence around the field, but that's what makes all of this edge to be able to move through here. That's all been cut off. So that's now open. And you can see that this kind of sinuous language of the whole park, that central esplanade line is set up so that when you're on that familiar part of the park and you're up high, you're looking down and you're invited into that walk all the way through to the south.
So on the final design, if I am inside of the sports field within the fenced area, how do I get out of it? What is my main access point?
All of that comes out of here, and there's some small entries here for the teams on that side.
So what happens in that wedge between the top part of the sports field, that arc, and the lawns that you mentioned were intended to be accessible?
So all of this here, what's happening?
That brown wedge between the dashed blue
this here.
line.
Yeah, that is a treatment swale. There's a whole series of rain garden treatment swales here. There's one along this whole edge by a retention area, and this is a swale to take water off of the field and off of this adjacent area and direct it for the civil engineering and
Do you zooming into the plan that you had there? I guess I'm just trying to understand the relationship of those lawns to, sorry, this is a playground,
Sorry, I mean, it's too close to be.
Yeah, so that brown area there is a swale, so you're not able or shouldn't go there.
Right, and then you have a fence that does not have any entries all the way through here. So that landscape being a little thicker and rougher is meant to be, the back of the.
That was my question. That's planted with landscaping that's going to be rougher, that's going to be less inviting, say, so people kind of are contained within the lawn areas.
That's right. So you have lawns now on both sides and in the middle here, and wide walkways that and lighting that kind of give you all the cues that this is how you navigate the park.
And then as it heads out to the waterfront, that swath, is that also all slope lawn?
Oh, there's lawn to the top of the riprap. Yeah. And some, but it's more, no, it's rougher. It's not going to be, we're not going to mow that. Sorry. No, that's just a rougher waterfront treatment of shrubs and whatnot. Not too high because we want to not block.
So it's a planting bed.
Yeah.
So there isn't true access to the riprap.
No,
area.
That's pretty treacherous, and we've been asked not to encourage that.
Mm-hmm. What about then that lawn area on the corner?
Yeah, this is the CSO structure.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of a hands-off thing. And we don't want to, and I think there are going to be portions of that because of a vertical drop that still have to maintain a little bit of a protection, fall protection.
Sorry, I just mean the one that you have colored as lawn as part of your design. Yeah, that area. Yeah. That's an actual lawn, or is it a planting bed?
That's actual lawn, but there's some protection here to keep people out of the vertical drop
So
of the
like
CSO.
a guardrail or something?
I believe it's a fence. It's kind of
Fence.
owned by, again, the people managing CSOs. You don't want to touch those.
I'm overall just trying to understand what areas are accessible and which are not.
Mhm.
And how does the general public understand from the design vocabulary what is accessible or not? Because in the end, we see, in public parks, everybody feels very free, very excited.
Yeah.
And we often see people go into areas are intended to be more naturalized because there isn't a clear boundary or indication. And not having a visual of exactly what planting you're proposing, that worries me a little bit here. I do think the use of stone boulders is effective in both providing opportunity for people to sit. And when you have the Belgian blocks as kind of indicating areas for circulation without being a specific set path. So there's that balance of nature versus, use. So in this area in particular, and again, I wasn't part of the schematic where perhaps you had a little bit more detail on the design. I just worry about how do we naturally indicate to people where they're supposed to go and use and step on lawns versus where with subtle indications, whether it's boulders or rougher shrubs, you kind of suggest that people don't trespass in those areas. Specifically, as you're coming down into the riprap, I could see children accidentally going there, and maybe it's not as accessible for parents to go after them. So I'm a little bit worried about that clarity.
Unfortunately, the rest of the park, you can see a bit of it right here. All the paths go right up against the riprap, and people are climbing all over it. And it's, so all of this is putting in a rougher treatment than that.
Will there be signage like Brooklyn Bridge Park has signage that says don't climb the rocks? Right now it's perhaps a more informal park, and you're making it a lot more formalized. So I think some of these just cues would be helpful.
Yeah, no, again, the community loves their rough around the edges park. So we didn't want to tell them not to do things that so I feel a little funny about that, but I understand the need, perhaps. And I don't know, I'm not a signage person, and I'm not really, as you can tell from earlier conversations, about like what the park standard for something like that is, because Brooklyn Bridge Park's a bit of an exception. Okay.
Yeah, this park, and I believe the other parts of the park as well have standard park signage. We'll have all the safety signage as part of the suite, the standard suite. Once the park is built out, the signage will be installed by the Parks Department and as needed.
All things being considered, given our feedback, I think this is a remarkably ambitious, outstanding project that will just be value added. I think the thing that you're hearing is not hesitation about the project, but oftentimes at this table, we've gotten tagged by creating private parks or private entrances or private this. It's just a moment in time where these sensitivities are very robust. I think we've heard really some interesting points. You're in the middle of final design plan. I think, from my perspective, not only speaking for myself, I think it's great to go to have you go back. Listen carefully, make these adjustments, and I consider them basically very minor, because we don't even know how complicated it's been to even get to this point. And let's move forward. I just don't want you to hear that we are not as ambitious as you are for getting this done with a lack of it.
And I
Also,
want to
think, if we could look at the plan view on 43rd Street, I've been to this park, and I do remember there was kind of like this, kind of grand entrance. You'd see the statue of, I forget who it was, and then there'd be a kind of overhang sign. Is that still there? Okay. Because that feels, would that still be like a primary entrance?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that still feels like a pretty good sign, I think. Maybe it's like this, that seems like a secondary entrance on the south side. But I
And-
think that sign is pretty prominent, so you do feel like you're entering the park when you go. to
Another
that
reason
sign.
why the north entrance, I think, is more primary is on the south side of 43rd is sanitation department facility lined with Datner did a beautiful garage for the sanitary sanitation department. Datner's our architect, so.
That signage on the north side is that, that's not park signage, correct?
No, that's Parks.
On that side there is. So it's,
Because that area is managed by the Parks Department.
okay.
The Flow Beach property. That's okay. So the park signage is on that north entrance. It's got a parks leaf on it and the name of the park. And perhaps we can look into having a sign where the limit of work is on this plan, which is the actual boundary of what the Parks Department maintains. My other point was at the Float Bridge area, that is a PPA property, and I don't think we want to put signage on somebody else's property.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. So I do want to observe for fellow commissioners that in a moment, we will look at Steiner Sequel, and there will be a separate signage package for Steiner Sequel that may be able to incorporate the signage that Parks is not able to include in that south side. So the signage within the park is fully within the purview of Parks, but that signage is not. I'm just clarifying there. So with that, I would I'll call for a vote unless there's any additional comments from commissioners. Okay, so just summarizing, we have comments around the signage, and Parks has committed to have all of the standard signage regarding the issues that we raised in this conversation within the park. We all agree that this is a delightful design and long coming, and we're excited to have this addition to our city's parks. So this is item 28647. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote. Ken Seth Armstead,
Abstain.
Isabel Casilla,
With the condition that we understand signage a little bit better moving forward.
okay. Lori Hawkinson,
Approved with the signage.
Bill Heinzen,
Approved with the condition that Commissioner that Isabel mentioned.
I'll summarize at the end. Karen Keel,
Approved.
Manuel Miranda,
Approved.
Susan Morgenthau,
Approved.
Meryl Tisch, Jimmy Van Bramer.
Approve.
I also approve with, and the condition is simply that we understand with clarity, and I know you'll be working with Parks on that, what the signage is within the park, where it goes, and then what's not within the package of signage that goes with the park, so that we can understand clearly what's needed beyond limits of the project. And the project is approved.
Nice, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now the next public hearing item is 28646. It's the final review of the construction of two soundstage buildings, a parking structure and lot, and the rehabilitation of two industrial buildings and adjacent site work at the Made in New York South Campus at Bush Terminal in Brooklyn. Okay, per standard procedure, the applicant will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. You may begin the presentation.
Good morning, commissioners and friends.
Good morning.
To use a movie analogy, this is the second part of a double feature. So I'm presenting. My name's Bill Stein. I'm a senior consulting principal with Datner Architects. We're the architects working with Steiner on the Sequel project and collaborating with MVVA on the landscape elements. I'm going to focus on some of the main elements of the project, as well as some of the changes that have occurred since the last submission we made. As we've discussed, the site is immediately adjacent to the Bush Terminal Piers Park, immediately to the east. First Avenue is further to the east. The site is separated from First Avenue by a working rail yard. The site spans from 43rd Street to 50th Street. It's approximately 14 acres. This is a aerial overview, oblique view of existing conditions. This project will consist of several new buildings, which I'll show you momentarily, including the renovation and adaptive reuse of the existing historic buildings 57 and 58 at the south end of the site, and two new production stage buildings, stages 1 through 4 and 5 through 8, which will be state-of-the-art sound stages for film and media production. A parking garage, and a variety of ancillary facilities as well as landscaping. The following slides are photos of some of the existing conditions in the neighborhood and the site. I'll go through these quickly. The view of the site as it is. The building in the foreground is Building G, which will be demolished to make way for the new soundstage buildings. Beyond that are buildings 57 and 58, which I'll show you in more detail. And of course, to the right is the park. Or photos of existing conditions. And this is on the right is the entrance signage that we spoke about before. Well, there is the park's logo. Not sure who erected that, but it's there, and it does mark the entry to the park. They're all existing conditions. And as I said, the major elements of the project will be starting from the south to the north or from the left to the right. Buildings 58 and 57, which are existing historic buildings, and we've worked closely with SHPO in reviewing the treatment and the rehabilitative work on the facades of these buildings. Next, going further north or to the right is a new parking structure. And then to the right of those are two production soundstage buildings, as I mentioned, stages 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. In addition to the facilities I mentioned, these buildings will have solar panels on the roof and green roofs. The parking will include EV charging stations and bicycle parking as well. This is the east elevation of the entire campus, again, starting from the left to the right, buildings 58, 57, the parking structure, and then the two soundstage buildings, 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. Focusing on buildings 58 and 57, these are concrete buildings which will be rehabilitated. The design has been reviewed. The design has been reviewed with the State Historic Preservation Office. One of the changes we've made in response to SHPO comments is to propose the restoration of a canopy that runs continuously along the facade above the first floor level of buildings 58 and 57. It's a metal facade, a traditional industrial element, which will be restored in slightly modified form as part of this project. To the right is the parking garage. And then moving on to the soundstage buildings, what you see here are the ancillary facilities to the sound stages with the actual stages behind. These buildings will contain a variety of support facilities for the sound stages. The buildings are, as you can see, are clad in brick. There is, with projected piers, there is a subtle but visible vertical orientation or vertical articulation that recalls the verticality of building G, the existing building G, and the other historic stores or warehouse buildings that typically were divided by bearing walls into vertical sections. And these facades, although these buildings are very different in proportion, recall that type of rhythm with a verticality. At the south end of each of the two buildings is a 5-story section, which will also contain support facilities for film and media production. On the north facades of the buildings, the brick wraps around. On stages 1 through 4, there is a step down on the west side that'll provide an outdoor terrace for production staff working in the building. And as we come around to the west facades, this is facing the park, the brick wraps around on the 5-story sections of both buildings, but then this is the facade of the sound stages. The structure for the sound stages is precast concrete panels. So these are precast concrete panels along the west facade. We are anticipating an artist selection process to select an artist who will create murals for these facades facing the park and facing the harbor. And these are the south facades. These will be, again, the brick wraps around, and then we have precast panels. These facades will be used with green screens for outdoor production facilities. The garage facades, and this is the west facade of the entire campus, again in reverse from south to north or right to left. Buildings 58, 57, the garage, and the 2 soundstage buildings. Another element, and this is the previous submission, is, and we talked a little about this, is this iconic entrance gateway to the campus, which is designed to recall the historic cranes of Bush Terminal, as well as to recall the trusses and other equipment used in film production, as well as creating an iconic entryway to the Steiner-Sequel campus. Since this previous submission, we've updated this design, reducing the size of some of the members, looking at the proportions to just go back and forth again, to make it a little cleaner, a little sharper, a little bit more open feeling. Again, the previous version and the current version. As you can see, there's a slight refinement, but a definite refinement of the size and proportions of the members. As was mentioned, the signage, which is depicted here in concept, will be a separate submission to the commission. And this is a view of the entry structure from First Avenue, building 58 and a little bit of 57 in the background. And this is the updated view. Again, the previous version, a little bit heavier, a little bit lighter, a little bit more open. A view looking towards the west at that entrance structure. And these drawings I'll go through. We can come back to them if you have questions, but these are really more technical drawings for this entry structure.
It's just one back.
Sure.
Are these different?
No, these
are the same.
Yeah, okay, so this is I mean, it's a slight adjustment of proportions. Again, this is previously submitted. So you see the dimension, for example, of the truss is a little bit. Okay.
That's the original.
This is the original.
It's just a foot.
Yeah, previously submitted. This is the original. Okay.
Yeah, but the dimension's 10.6. Is
Yeah,
that what
10.6.
10.6?
10.6 and now 9.6. Again, these are small adjustments, but we do think they make a difference. The size of the supporting columns has been modified to make the entrance structure feel a little bit more open, a little bit cleaner, a little bit less massive. And again, previously submitted, the current design. And then we have the actual entrance gateway with the canopy where trucks, cars, or pedestrians stop. And there's, you know, as Doug mentioned, security is a major concern at film studios, as well as control of traffic. Another issue with film studios is there's a significant amount of truck traffic, so there are safety concerns as well. I won't go into the plans, only to say that at the soundstage buildings, as I mentioned, the front bar, the brick-clad bar, are support facilities for the production. And you see here the 8 stages, and to the south side of each of the buildings is the 5-story support facility, again, with a variety of production support functions. And as we go up the building, they're on the multiple floors. Of course, the sound stages are very large spaces, you know, open to above. But we have 3 levels in the eastern bar and 5 levels on the southern bar of support facilities. And as I mentioned, on the roofs are largely solar panels and some green roof elements. And buildings 57 and 58, again, will be adaptively reused for support facilities on the ground floor, largely mill shops for set building. And if we go up, set dressing on the second floor, multi-purpose wardrobe, and then on the upper floors, office suites for the various productions that are using the campus. And again, solar panels on the roof, roofs of these buildings, as well as the sound stages. This is a section through the stage buildings, typical section of the 3-story support section, the long span, large sound stage area, and a section through the 5-story support building, and sections through the garage, as well as the buildings 58 and 57. Oops.
Is the garage there sloped on every floor?
They're sloped floors, yes. There are one other structure, which is an unenclosed structure, but a fence structure, is a substation that is located just to the north of the stages 5 to 8. And there have been no changes to the previous submission on that. This is a fenced area that contains electrical switching elevation for that. On the landscaping, we worked in, as I mentioned, in collaboration with MVVA. And one change we've made here, this is the previous submission, is at the request of SHPO, we had eliminated a grove of quaking aspens that were between the buildings 57 and 58 and First Avenue on the east side of the parking lot. And we've now restored some of the quaking aspens in a couple of areas to balance the request to have more of a prominent landscape element while still maintaining views from First Avenue to buildings 57 and 58. And there's a variety of fencing types. This has all been previously submitted, so I won't dwell on it, that surround the campus and provide a balance of visibility to the public and the necessary security for the operation of the lot. And I'd like to just, as we come to an end, I'd like to focus on something. This is in a way going back to the previous item. that Gulliver talked about, the bikeway. This is kind of that transitional area on the west side of the Sequel campus, moving into the park area, a bike trail, the kind of layered planting areas. Yes, it's public. This is outside the perimeter of Steiner Sequel, but got included in this presentation. It's like a flashback to the previous movie, if you will. Yeah. It's totally public though. There's some of the planting materials that Gulliver previously described. There are slots between the buildings, so although it's across the rail yard, there are views through the campus towards the park and the water. And a view, as I mentioned, a working rail yard, but this is a view from First Avenue of what the campus might look like when built. And a view on the west side of the bike path and pedestrian path and to the park. Of the bike path, view from the park back at the buildings. Again, very much a placeholder, not a design for a mural to be created by an artist or artists through a selection process. And then massing models of the campus, again, starting with, in this view, buildings 57, 58, the garage, the two soundstage buildings, and from the other direction. And finally, an overview and some of the materials we've talked about: the brick, aluminum windows, steel canopies, so on. And finally, the lighting, which was previously submitted and reviewed. A depiction of the lighting of the soundstage buildings. And finally, a dusk view of the Steiner Sequel campus in operation. You can see the truck traffic. It'll be a busy, very active site employing something like 2,000 people. And with a tremendous amount of economic activity and revitalization of the Bush Terminal area. And as with the previous, the end.
Okay, Shreyashi, do we have any public testimony?
We do not have any in-person testimony. Jenna, do we have any remote testimony?
Hi, yes, there are several people signed up to testify remotely. I'm going to be reading down the list in order of sign up. Is there a Damian Andrade present? Okay, if that person comes online, we'll allow him to testify. The next person is Catherine Walsh. Are you present? No. Okay, the next person is Sebastian Baez. I'm going to ask you to unmute in 1 second, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
All right, can everybody in the room hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Sebastian Baez. I use he, him pronouns, and I work at Uprose, a community-based organization in Sunset Park. We do a lot of work with community planning for the industrial waterfront. And at this moment, I would like to respectfully request that the commissioners of the Public Design Commission table this project for a vote. Currently, based off of this presentation and based off the history of this project, it is unclear how this proposal fits in with existing community-based plans and studies. For instance, the Sunset Park 197A plan describes the use of the maritime industrial waterfront for maritime dependent green industries, and it is unclear whether Steiner Studios is an example of such use. Additionally, the site where Steiner Studios Sequel is proposed is the Bush Terminal site, former Bush Terminal. This is the subject of the New York State Sunset Park Brownfield Opportunity Area, and currently it is being examined as a use for, as a site for green industries and green transportation. Additionally, there is a rail yard that goes right along the edge of the Steiner Studio sequel project, and there has been no discussion about how this rail yard will be incorporated or not incorporated into the proposal mentioned today, into the proposal discussed today. Additionally, and as the Public Design Commission may have received, our local elected officials are also asking the commission to table a vote for this project. This includes Councilmember Alexa Aviles, Assemblymember Marcelo Mitaines, and the Chair of the Community Board 7, Julio Peña III. So at this moment, I'm asking the commission to respectfully table this vote, even though it has already been tabled, to allow for more community discussion and participation in the future of this very important site, which, as mentioned, has been the subject of various studies and proposals and plans for maritime and industrial uses, especially considering it's right next to a rail yard and right next to the water. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to testify is Karen Rolnick. I'm going to ask you to unmute and then you will have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, hi, my name is Karen Rolnick. I live on 33rd Street between 4th and 5th, just a few blocks from the site. And I strongly support this project. I think the studios will bring a great amount of terrific jobs into the neighborhood. And many of my neighbors are on board with that feeling as well. The only thing I'm slightly concerned about is the increased traffic. And I would like to urge you to, you know, encourage the people coming there to come by subway, maybe even by having a shuttle back and forth from the subway to encourage people to use it. And really, that's all I have to say about it, just that I think it's a terrific project that will bring jobs and I support it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go back to the 2 people that I had asked about earlier. Is Damian Andrade present? Still no. Catherine Walsh? Okay, great. I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm just making sure I can see myself and see others. Okay, that's great. My name is Catherine Walsh, Katie Walsh. I am sorry, I'm getting a little echo. I am a Sunset Park neighbor. I am also on the community board 7. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared the fact that I did attend the presentation that happened a couple weeks ago from to the community board on this project in particular. There was one related to it was like parks, and then the other was on the economic development waterfront committee. So the 2 came together and presented. I just want to appreciate a lot of the questions that came up from the commissioners today related to the park project already. A lot of the things that you raised around access, community access is really important to us. And so I just really applaud that recognition of making sure that this is a really, really accessible park. Just as noted, if you don't know our community, we have some of the highest asthma rates. We have heavy trucking and transportation challenges. There's a current study that's being done by the state working with the city on air quality. These are major challenges that we experience. And so any access that we have to parks, to public space is so critical. And so it's really important that we get people down there and we do so in a safe way. So what I wanted to just raise is that the community board actually wasn't able to take a position on this. There was a delay of the vote. So Community Board 7 hasn't had an opportunity to provide, to vote on it yet. And we actually delayed the vote. And so this is something I'm aware of the fact that we have elected officials who have sent through a letter, our state assembly member, Marcelo Mitaines, our city council member, Alexa Aviles, and our chairperson, Julio Peña. There was a letter that was submitted this morning to the Public Design Commission asking to table this vote, specifically on this project. I know we had the parks presentation, but I'm specifically referencing the actual Steiner Studios project, and you can reference and read that letter. The concerns that I just wanted to raise that again showed up in the meeting that we had with Steiner Studios is around questions on economic development, jobs, transportation. We also have the most dangerous corridor, 3rd Avenue and all of Brooklyn, and we have a lot of concerns about and looking for partnership and collaboration on trucking and safety. Again, raise the issue around air quality and environmental and climate sustainability. But then also most maybe, of importance as well is community career opportunities and career advancement and more details on jobs and hiring. So just wanted to be able to say that we are looking for further opportunities to engage with Steiner. And I came to testify today to ask that the commissioners, in your review of the proposal, consider tabling this vote. Thank you.
Let's see. Is anyone else present in the Zoom room here to testify today who may not have signed up online? If so, please use the raise hand tool. I see no additional people here to testify. Thanks.
Okay, so Jenna, you're confirming there is no more remote testimony, is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to ask the team to respond to that testimony.
We've been working on this project. This is on. This on?
Yes,
Okay.
thanks.
We've been working on this for 3 years. The park project only goes ahead with this project, obviously. As far as industries for New York, in terms of wages, union, clean, lack of bad emissions, minimal truck traffic for a 14-acre site. Production trucks, when they do leave the site, it's generally once a day or come back once a day. It's an off hours business because of the long hours. They start early, they leave late. And we have sought community involvement, community input for 3 years, dozens of meetings and reaching out to various organizations. Some organizations have been responsive and some send in, things that, last minute to thwart the process. But we would like to get under construction. Every day that people are not working is a day they can never recover those wages. And it's been a long haul. We think this is as clean an industry and as well-paying and important for the city of New York as any industry could be, and that it is a huge improvement over the present condition. This is what we have before us. This is the project. It is not of another use. It is not for further deliberation and studies of what should be here. It is really what we think is the best, highest, best use for the site today and for the future. And I think our track record in the Navy Yard, both in terms of economic importance and in terms of community impact, speak volumes for what we will have here. And that is the best test of whether or not this should be greenlit. Thank you. Yeah.
The park project doesn't happen unless this one does. Could you just expand on that?
We have a budget of about $10 million for the park improvements. That is part of our community benefits package for this project. We would not, much as I like parks, we would not make that investment without this project. It just doesn't, it is part of the package. While it's 2 separate submissions, as the sign is a separate submission, it's one overall project.
Couldn't park speak to that? Is that the case that the park would not move forward?
And also, you just said that this is not, yeah.
So let's give Parks a chance to answer that question.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Caroline Morris from the Parks Planning Department or Planning Office at the Parks Department. And yes, the park would not move forward without the Steiner project.
Because you would need that $10 million.
We need the funding.
It's about $10 million.
Yeah, we aren't putting. any
There's
money
nothing
in.
being done but us. The EDC in Parks was done 10 years ago and it's static.
But people are using the park now and it already exists. It's not like there's no park. There is a park and it has limited use. Right. Okay. But the question I have for you is that you said something I think is pivotal. You said this is what we feel is what's the best use of this space now, and there's not a space for negotiation on how this site, like this, I from what you said, I understood you just want us to either approve it or step away from it.
I was really speaking as to maritime or green use. We've got electric vehicle chargers, I believe, serving with the capacity to serve 50% of the spaces in the parking structure. We've got solar arrays on every roof. We have green roofs, and we have an industry that is incredibly clean for this size of a site.
I'm speaking, I'm just saying like,
project.
I'm
We
just
don't
saying
know-
only for this moment, in terms of accessibility to this site and in terms of whether or not there can be changes to this site, it would be helpful if there were indication that you were willing to make amendments to it. And if we can negotiate a bit about what those amendments would be before we would approve it, even if it is connected to an existing park, which people use already.
We are open, I think this commissioner, I'm sorry, I don't have. Isabel, okay, I have a daughter, same spelling. We've had multiple iterations, both with parks and with the PDC, and we're open to further tweaking. I'm not drawing a line in the sand, but we do need to get approval in order to meet our construction schedule. And this is not our first presentation or submission. There's not an ultimatum here, but I think at a certain point, it doesn't become productive for us to keep changing things, depending on the scope.
So there were lots of references. The community board meeting that happened maybe last month or whatever.
Yeah.
Did they vote at all, or there wasn't a formal recommendation or vote by the community board either in favor of this project, nor was there a vote to table this or postpone it, right? Am
I believe a couple of years back, we had a vote or a letter. Juliet, I'm looking to you. We got something, Juliet runs our development and real estate company. We did get some sort of approval or letter from the community board or the economic development committee. And I think what we have gotten caught up with at the community board level is some greater dissatisfaction they have with EDC and the larger Bush Terminal, BAT, some other things. But we don't want to be penalized because of issues people have with that process that preceded us.
I don't think anybody wants to penalize you at all. I think it's great that you want to be invested in this park as well as investing in Brooklyn. I think that's admirable. But I do also think that you need partnership with your community neighbors, and you need to be a good neighbor. And it's really hard for somebody who has as much power as you have to be a good neighbor. And that starts with getting the approval of your neighbors for things that are going to be permanent, which they have no vote after this vote. They have no voice after this voice. So I'm uncomfortable without a community board vote one way or the other. And I don't take it that one witness who says that you didn't get community board, I don't take it on their word. I'm going to do my due diligence and find out whether or not there's a community board approval or disapproval.
I
Sorry,
think
can I just
Have a response from EDC. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Tara Das. I'm with the Government Community Relations Department at EDC. And just to add to what Doug mentioned, so at the most recent community board meeting, that was November 14th, there was not enough quorum to provide a vote. So there was a presentation made, all questions were answered. Unfortunately, there were not enough representatives from the community board to make a vote. So it was pushed to the full board meeting. Unfortunately, the same thing happened then. There have certainly been significant moments of going to the community board as well as the Sunset Park Task Force meetings over the years. Independently of the community board meetings, we've also had conversations with local elected officials to attend a public meeting in January to talk about the project, both Steiner as well as EDC's other involvements at Mini. So this certainly won't be the last opportunity to engage with the community.
Can you summarize for us how many times this project has gone to the community board, and also summarize for us who determines the use under the rules of our city? Who determines the use?
In terms of the community board, I believe Steiner's been 5 times. In addition to that, EDC has been to present on Mini. I want to say probably around 5 times as well, in addition to the Sunset Park Task Force meetings. This has been a standing agenda item for the past 2 years. So that's approximately 8 to 10 meetings that this has been discussed publicly with members of the community, both task force as well as community board. In terms of the intended use waiver.
I would like, if you could speak to the community board's response. The questions here from as we understand it, as they were raised, have to do with the use. So I'd like you to speak to that, as well as to the community board's response to that.
And just to clarify, when you say use, do you mean specifically to the use of that brought in the project? Yeah, so this did go through a request for proposals process back in 2017. Steiner Studios was awarded the contract in 2019. In terms of the intended use prior to that, Waverly, do you have more to add to this?
The use falls in within the zoning rights of this section.
If you could introduce yourself.
Sorry, Waverly Neer. I'm with the asset management team at EDC.
Come up forward a little. You were with EDC, is that right?
I'm with EDC, yeah. Waverly Neer with EDC, our
Okay.
asset management team.
Okay. Go
He
ahead.
was a real estate agent in my last studio in Sunset Park.
In Industry City. It's nice to see you. Yeah, great to be back. In
And I
terms
know
of the
there's no conflict there, so proceed.
in terms of the intended use, this use falls within, the site zoning. Again, just to reiterate, this site has been derelict for over 40 years. And so this is bringing an immense amount of jobs, a ton of public benefits to the site. It was competitively procured back in 2017. Steiner was awarded the RFP award. And I think that addresses your question on the use, but if there's something more specific, I'm happy to dive
Just
into
a
it.
follow-on question is, so it was a competitive process, and was the community board apprised at all points that that would be the process that would be followed vis-a-vis the designation of use?
Sure. I mean, the community board and Sunset Park task force have been apprised over the last 2 years regarding this project. EDC has independently and on our own behalf approached the community board to provide project updates, along with Steiner also attending regular community board meetings, presenting project updates along with their own community engagement independent of the community board, and thoroughly asking any questions the community board has brought forth.
And are you aware of any objection by the community board to that competitive process and the content of the RFP as it was defined?
I am not aware now.
Please.
I do not know you, Mr. Steiner, but I know of you. Let me tell you how I know of you. I was a chancellor of the school system when you were starting Steiner Studios, the original version 1. We never had a better partner. I would say it was one of the few projects in New York that from the day they opened their doors to our students, opened their doors to the community. They are great community partners. I can speak to that firsthand. We've never met, correct? I don't think we've ever met. And I never got the chance to acknowledge this publicly. But I don't think the schools, if you call David Banks today and say, go to your list of community partners and tell me the top 10 in New York City from everything, it would be Steiner Studios. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I think what you're doing for the park is of enormous service to the community. That does not mean that you're not going to get a benefit from moving forward, that's business. Business is business, community participation is community participation. But I would just say from the perspective of this commissioner and from what we learned about people's view of this table, to table this at this moment would just be an indicator that we are not serious about our partnerships with economic development and with all the other strategic initiatives that I think would make this city get better. I'm not an expert on the details, sir. I know of your reputation. I have never heard a negative word about your business practice, about your partnership in the communities, or anything like that. I, as a commissioner, I am ready to call the question.
Commissioners, any other comments before I summarize?
I have a question.
Manuel.
I think it's just, do we as a commission have to have the community board approval before we vote? No. Okay.
It's
And
not
I do-
required, it's strongly encouraged, which is why I was asking the questions about how many times it has been to the community board and the responses at the various phases of the development of this.
Mhm. And then, I'm not sure that we've looked at like the design law too, or do we want to not do that now?
So actually, I can speak to this. This project is on for final review. We've looked at the design prior to my time here since 2021. So a lot of this is what you're seeing has been baked through tons of back and forth between PDC and EDC and the designers here. The reason it's on for final, we received a lot of requests for testimony, so we put it on for public hearing today, but it's very unusual for us to do this at this late of the stage.
Should I clarify the issue with the signage? You had mentioned when the presentation started that the sign is not part of this
So
review.
the signage will be a separate package. So we don't have to opine on that now. It will come to us as a separate package.
Yeah,
Yes.
all the signage, all of it.
All of it, yeah.
But it is not 8 times to the community board is not indicative. No vote is also not indicative, but no vote is not indicative. And I admittedly, I respect and support my fellow commissioners who can speak to how it is you are a partner, but every case is slightly different. And this is a different community than Navy Yard. And I was your neighbor in Fort Greene, and I never personally had a problem, but that is not this community. And if this community has an issue with you, I think it behooves us to let that be resolved before we opine. And I think that accessibility in general as regards this design, I can't say, I wasn't on the commission. I wasn't a commissioner when you first came before the commission. So I can't say that I can keep every promise that everybody made before me, but I can tell you how I feel about it now. And it feels overwhelming. And if I lived there, I would feel overwhelmed by this. And I think that we should be slow to make a final decision. And I don't think that makes us unserious about business. I think we do business every day.
I
Here.
would like to say, as far as community partnerships, the best test of that is how we have been since 1999 at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Check with whoever you want to check with. And while the community is different in Sunset Park than it is in Fort Greene and Vinegar Hill and Williamsburg, we're the same. And I take my civic obligation very seriously. We're very big supporters in Brooklyn of BRIC, BAM, Theater for an Audience, St. Anne's Warehouse, Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, all of the arts, because I think arts is one of the few ways we can effectuate change and part of what makes life worth living. This is the creative class. I think it adds a lot of plus for New York City. And we try to do the right thing. Our workforce reflects our beliefs. We walk the walk, talk the talk. I don't know the exact expression, or I'm not getting it right. But we try to do the right thing, and we think it's a good industry.
I would say it was sus.
We truly try to do the right thing by everyone. Whether it's our employees, I have a different way of managing. I don't manage the budgets. We manage the clients. and we manage to employees. And to us, it's not a zero-sum game. We do not have an adversarial relationship with any of our vendors, our contractors, our clients. It should be good for everybody, and it should be good for the community. I want to be able to do more projects in New York City and come back to PDC, and you know that we did everything we said we were going to do. And whether or not I do another project in New York City, I want you to feel like we do this, whatever we say we're going to do. And that is to try to get locals into the workforce, into the unions, and make a career in this business where, you know, has great upside and ready to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Steiner. So, Jimmy. Do you want this?
Sure. I greatly care about what community boards have to say, having served on my community board and been an elected official. But it doesn't seem like there's a clear vote here either way. So I don't think that we have any indication that they don't support this. There wasn't quorum. So it's just sort of an open question, and I don't feel like I can interpret that. All I can do is interpret this. I will also add, I do believe in this industry, having represented Kaufman Astoria Studios and Silver Cup for many, many years in Long Island City, and along with Broadway Stages and others. There is no question about the economic importance of this industry and projects like this. We did a project with Kaufman where we expanded Kaufman, one that I feel very, very proud of. So I think there's no question about the importance here of the industry and the benefits of this. And I just think that that's really important to say. Also, the support of the arts. These are union jobs. That's good for the arts, and we are supporting the arts by supporting this industry. So just really important to me, both in terms of the community board question for me, and then also just the greater importance of the industry and projects like this.
Thank you, Jimmy. Lori, please.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat anything anybody else has said. I just want to raise the issue about the sign, which I understand will be taken up at the next session, but may I mention that I think it hasn't changed much. And I'm interested, just for future reference, when you go do that, is the scale of what's on the building. And maybe Manuel wants to speak to this, but what's on the building and what's in front. I don't see that thing here.
So the far left.
Yeah, it's very hard to see here, that giant sign that became 1 foot smaller. So I'd love to see those two things together. I think I'm really excited about the park. You know, I followed this project. I did the walkthrough myself. I've been here for a long time, so I can say I was there. You know, you guys have responded. I am not a fan of slopes parking structures because they can never be used for anything but parking. And hopefully the world we are moving towards, we will not have as many cars that sit there all the time doing nothing. And when they're not there, the building can't be used for anything else. But that probably ship has sailed. So, you know, I just want to make the note about the sign.
Manuel.
Sign.
Yeah, I have similar thoughts about the signage, but we'll talk about it, I guess, in the next round. But also, you know, I think the question about the use, you know, I'm not sure if that's really in our purview. So that's a question that I have. Like, do we determine do we approve the use of the building? And this site, you know, I think was mandated to be developed, you know, as manufacturing, specifically, you know, this exact industry. So it's not really like, you know, Steiner's coming in and saying, hey, we're putting this here. This was requested by the previous administration. And I was actually at a press conference where the mayor talked about how this site would be developed in exactly the way that it's being presented now. So I just want to make that clear too.
That's correct, that we do not determine the use. There is a competitive process that defines a range of uses, and Steiner was the winner of that competitive process, but we don't determine that use. Karen.
Just one quick thought, which is as a Brooklynite who lives north of this area and also north of, I forget, what is the name of the area where West Elm is and the Brooklyn Nets practice facility? Yeah, Industry City. So as someone who lives north of that also, it's unclear to me that the DOT or anyone has given any thought to egress out of these areas, and the traffic now on Fourth Avenue, Fifth Avenue, Sixth Avenue, Seventh Avenue, trying to get to Eastern Parkway is a disaster. And so I'm just curious if there have been any conversations with the DOT about how all these cars that are going into this parking structure are going to get out of this area during, you know, schools coming out, everyone else going home. So it's just a thought, because it was never discussed, and I don't think I was here during the first discussion.
That's a really important question. Can anyone from EDC or the team speak to the DOT EIS that's going on now and what its scope is?
I promise to speak up. Is that better?
Better.
EDC is in discussions with DOT about a lot of different traffic calming and traffic mitigations in this area. Obviously, the EDC does not have purview over what is actually done, but we're partnering with the DOT to look at a couple different options, not only for vehicles, but bringing additional bike access through the area as well, but safe.
So will that EIS address the kind of concerns that Karen raised?
Yes. Yeah.
So does that answer your question regarding? Yeah. Okay. All right. So any last thoughts before I call the vote? Okay. So I want to summarize by saying that there's concern that there was not a vote by Community Board 7. We understand that the vote, that the fact that there was no vote is indicative of the fact that there was not a quorum. So we don't know what the outcome of the vote would be, although we do care very much what it would have been. So I would propose a vote, a condition of which is that we would continue to be apprised that this team follows through to make sure that CB7 has a vote where there's quorum, that they take some action on this site, but we vote in advance with that condition. Do others agree to that as a condition?
So just to clarify, we're voting with the condition that the community board approves.
No, that there's follow through with the community board and that the vote happens. We have our own vote. We can't make a condition of some other entity's vote that had the disposition of that vote.
Can we table to say we wait until that vote is approved? We can't. Okay.
But we can table. And we do not have to give a condition, though obviously that could happen in the amount of time while we table. We can vote to table. If we were tabling now, I actually don't know that. For me personally, I would be tabling because I believe that this is an impediment to egress. Even though they're improving the park, I think that this is a significant barrier to egress to the actual park, which they are improving. And that is my opinion at this point. I believe we need to negotiate on how it is that people, even that the Steiner sign, which we're going to get a separate package on the signs, that's not a part of this at this point, but that Steiner sign would overwhelm any other sign about where it is and how it is you get where you're going. It seems like we would be making an improvement to a public park that would feel like a private park. And I don't agree with that at this moment. I would table on those bases. And also, I would also consider that we don't normally have the opportunity to vote on things unless they've been to community boards. So we have their disposition, which is not part of our purview, but is part of our mission to respect. Public is the first word in our name, and we don't have their vote.
So I want to respond to that. But before I do that, I would like someone from the team or from EDC to again state for the record how many times this has gone to the community board, starting in what year?
Hi, this is Tara Das from EDC. Hi, yes, this is Tara Das from EDC. So starting in August 2020, when EDC publicly announced the selection of Steiner Studios. Brooklyn Community Board 7 sent a letter on September 17th, which received responses from EDC on September 18th. On September 30th, EDC board voted in support of this project. That was then followed by November 2020, when EDC sent a detailed response answering all the questions in the letter. Also in November 2020, Steiner presented this to the Sunset Park Task Force. It was attended by elected officials, Community Board 7, representatives from other stakeholder groups. On November 18th, 2020, Community Board 7 voted unanimously with 1 abstention to pass the committee's resolution supporting the Made in New York campus at Bush Terminal. September 20, oh, sorry, yes.
So restate what you just said.
Yeah, so in November 18th, 2020, Community Board 7 voted unanimously with 1 abstention to pass the committee's resolution supporting the Made in New York campus at Bush Terminal.
And that resolution included the scope of the request for proposals, correct?
So this was post-award, so that included what was the Steiner Studios plan at this site.
Okay, thank you. Continue, please.
Sorry, I just lost my place. September 2021, Steiner provided an update to Community Board 7. December 1 and 15, 2021, Steiner presented their progress on the design and portions of Bush Terminal Piers Park and the overall project to the Community Board. In January 27th, 2022, April 6th, 2022, July 20th, 2022, October 20th, 2022, February 23rd, 23, July 25th, 23, October 16th, 23, April 17th, 2023. Up until the October 16th, 2023. Updates on the Steiner project were provided to the Sunset Park Task Force at each of those meetings. April 17th, 2023, EDC presented on all of the mini campus to Community Board 7, which includes Steiner Studios. November 14th, 2023 is when Steiner then presented to Community Board 7 most recently. And then since then, EDC has also had conversations with Councilmember Aviles and Assemblymember Matenas about a public meeting about mini to review all aspects of the mini campus, provide an opportunity to engage on what next steps are for the entire project.
And what the vote that was not able to be taken at the most recent meeting because there was not quorum, what exactly was the nature of that specific vote?
Yeah, there were several questions about the park, about the economic development aspects of this project, including jobs and how local hiring would be done. All of those questions were answered and there were positive responses to each. On the economic development component, we've mentioned that we being EDC and Steiner to their respective purviews that there are certain legal aspects about discrimination when hiring that may preclude any specific targeted local hiring efforts, but of course there are certainly efforts to be recruiting locally within that scope. There was one question about process, soliciting that there has not been enough engagement on this process. To that question, Steiner responded about all the different touch points, many of those touch points I just listed. And I would say that was, the one question that perhaps did not feel satisfied, but still received an answer which is synonymous with.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize what you just said. There was one question from one person about the process. Is that right?
That's right.
There were questions around park, related to the park.
Yes.
And there were questions around hiring processes and related to this facility once built.
Yes.
Is that right? Those are the 3 areas of questions.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying. Anything else to add on that?
No.
Okay, all right. So I hear that there's a motion to table. I am asking if how others feel about that. And we understand that Commissioner Tisch, that you would not support that.
Would not support what?
Yes, no.
I do not support a motion to table.
Okay, so then let's proceed with the vote. And I will take a roll call now on item 28646. We can make it a condition that the team, I would offer that the team report back to this, to PDC on its conclusion of these conversations with CB7, understanding that the disposition of the vote is not within the purview of this commission. So I would offer that as a condition for approval. And so now we'll take a roll call vote on item 28646. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote. Kenseth Armstead. Thank you. Isabel.
I would vote to table this.
Understood. Vote to table from Kenseth Armstead. Isabel Castilla.
I move forward with approving as long as those conditions are met and that the signage design comes back. I would also like to mention that understanding the recap that was just described, it seems like the community's concerns have to do more with operational aspects of the project, not design aspects of the project, which is this commission's purview. So while we truly want to ensure projects are equitable and provide economic development to the city, I understand that's not the role of this commission, and there's other ways to address those questions.
Thank you, Isabel. Lori Hawkinson.
I'm going to approve with the condition of the signage, and I hope we have some back and forth about that, it'll be a working process on that signage, the two areas. Yeah.
And we can include that as a condition, working process on the signage. And as I mentioned earlier, report on the CB7 outcomes. Bill Heinzen.
Approve with conditions.
Karen Keel. Manuel Miranda.
Approve.
Susan Morgenthau.
Approve.
Meryl Tisch. Approve. Jimmy Valverde. I mean, sorry. Jimmy.
I approve for both of us.
You're not allowed to do that, but we understand that I also approve with conditions, so the project is approved. Thank you, everyone, for your answering our questions. And we will now be taking a 5-minute break, and then we'll resume. Okay, we don't have quorum back yet.
It's not for votes.
Oh, great, okay. So we'll now begin the committee meeting with the conceptual review of the construction of a life sciences building at 455 First Avenue between Mount Carmel Place and First Avenue in Manhattan. Will not hear public testimony or vote on this project today. Presenters, you may begin.
Thank you. So as noted, we're here for the conceptual review of Innovation East Life Sciences at 455 First Avenue in Manhattan. Our presenters today are Melissa Sarko and Peter Schubert from Enniad Architects.
Thank you. I was really excited to be here today to share our progress at the conceptual level for 455 First Avenue Innovation East. We're here on behalf of our development team, Economic Partners, and Elevate Research, their subsidiary, Elevate Research Properties, and Didco West, commercial life science developers in New York City and nationally, in conjunction with NYU Grossman School of Medicine, will be the anchor tenants. The project is located on First Avenue between 26th and 27th Streets, and we'll talk a little bit more about the importance of the site in a moment. And by the way, this is there's a lot of information in this presentation, so we're going to go through some of it very quickly. Please stop and interrupt if you need to pause or if you want to talk about any of this video. So Innovation East will in part fulfill some of the objectives of LifeSci. EC's initiative to grow the life sciences sector in New York City, building on the incredible density of research and talent in New York City. Location, Innovation East on First Avenue Health and Sciences Corridor, which has long played an important role as a health science cluster on First Avenue, including key participants from Bellevue Hospital, from NYU's Langone Tisch Hospital, Alexandria Center, and highlighted in orange is the CUNY Brookdale campus, which is the future home of Spark. So in blue is Innovation East, located between 26th and 27th Street. Our immediate neighbors include Bellevue Hospital to the east, residences to the north, including the 28th Street NYCHA residences and the micro units at the corner of 27th. To the south is the NYU nursing school. And other things to point out on 27th Street is Pedestrian Way, and to the left of the property is the Bellevue South Park. Isn't there a men's shelter still on the north side of the Bellevue Hospital?
Yeah, that would be on the Main Street of Alexandria.
It still exists and still functioning and open.
Right.
Oh, okay. Didn't have any sense, sorry. So this is the view of the existing building, the context. We'll go into some of the existing conditions very quickly and not there's any questions about it. Existing site plan in red, there's an area of the existing building which approaches over the property line, which to the project is restored back to the public right of way. Some of the photos of the existing facility, which was built in 1964, no longer serves purposes of a modern life science building. Currently, primarily occupied by the New York City Public Health Laboratory, which is moving to purpose-built space in Harlem. Some of these photos show some of the existing conditions around the site, which, in the better part of the last decade have been surrounded by scaffolding based on the condition of the building. It's also characterized by a number of vehicular access points that you can see on that from the place, some of the active loading docks in that location, and some of the disrepair. Other portions of the facade largely are opaque. On 27th Street in particular, there's a lot of opacity. And as we move around the site, that's fairly characteristic. The state plan is not going to raise through these. Elevation to the existing building is about 200 feet tall. And then we'll get to our proposed project, which is Innovation East, the state-of-the-art purpose-built life sciences hub. It will replace the outdated building, deliver some much-needed life science space to New York City, strengthens the First Avenue corridor, promotes that synergy with other research facilities, and supports a flexible life science environment while respecting the scale and the articulations that is surrounding that. We want to picture Mike.
Okay. What we're looking at is a building that's very much an avenue building along First Avenue between 26th and 27th. The life science corridor is really an exciting emerging new innovation district, not only for New York City, but we think for the US and really life science in general. As you can see, it's very much, it's on the corner of 26th and First. To the west is the Bellevue, South Bellevue Park. Across the street is Bellevue Garden, and those are sort of form an east-west axis. Around it, you can see the scale of the buildings are pretty much similar in the sense that east of the building are buildings of appropriate size and massing to the building we're proposing, and then around it are basically tower and a park format. Here you can see the massing of the building, and again, it's very much in sort of sympathy to the surrounding fabric, very much an infill building, and also fronting primarily First Avenue as avenue buildings do. Up and down, let's see, this is 26, right? First Avenue. Now you can see what the building itself fronts First Avenue and has a setback at an appropriate level at about 185 feet, so that it is very much part of the scale of First Avenue. And then there's a terrace setback for the mechanical at the top, as well as one floor of office. You can, looking north at 26th Street, you start to see the setback and its alignment to the buildings up and down the avenue. And you also start to see the ground floor emerge as a pedestrian experience. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Along 26th Street, you can see also very much in alignment with the buildings east-west along 26th Street. And here you can see the amount of the setback on First Avenue for the terrace. Bellevue Park to the south, I'm sorry, to the west, and then Bellevue Gardens across the street. Looking west on this is east on 26th Street. You can see the relationship of the building to the Bellevue South Park.
We'll talk a little bit about the drivers that, have gotten us to the conceptual level that we're at today in terms of the bulk and the massing. In particular, it's important to point out that this is a purpose-built facility to support life sciences, and in particular to support the wet bench research environment, which has some very specific planning considerations, including the fact that everything is being developed on an 11-foot module to support flexible and efficient laboratory planning. Also, there's a kind of a critical core dimension from the floor to the window of 55 feet, which allows for the flexible layouts of the open bench and the lab support areas. It's a large floor plate, which is typically desired for life science use. And then the floor to floor heights tend to be a bit taller because there's a lot more infrastructure that needs to be incorporated into a building to support research continuity for the research environment. We're also developing the building to be sustainable. So we're targeting LEED Gold. There will be a number of energy efficiency measures in the building, including the electric central plant, which will help the New York City in its transition from fossil fuels. We've also established a design flood elevation, taking into account climate change and future sea level projections, so that all of our critical infrastructure is raised above that design flood elevation, which puts a little bit more pressure on our ground floor and our second floor to bring some of that mechanical equipment out from spaces that might typically, where you might typically see it in the basement. This is a typical floor. The building's being developed as a core and shell building, but again, thinking through the critical planning dimensions, the 11-foot module starts to set up our very efficient 33-foot structural grid and has dictated this center core arrangement, which establishes kind of the symmetry in our plan for the project. And then thinking about the types of tenants that will be located in the facility, we have designed this so that there's flexibility in the size of different tenant groups. So there could be 4 tenants per floor or larger tenants to support incubators and startups, growth stage companies, and mature research and development companies, with the goal of growing the life sciences here in New York City and keeping them here.
life science in New York is exciting for New York because it's really the only city where you can get chemicals up vertically in the building. So each building and each plot within New York City becomes its own innovation sort of center. It also feeds into the amenities around the neighborhood and also provides amenities for the surrounding neighborhood. So as the life science ecosystem is fundamentally a very flexible environment that's really all about choice and the ability to have every floor operate any number of different ways. We're also able to include a sort of a ground floor where there's multi-purpose lobbies and cafes that are for the building itself, but also the surrounding neighborhood. The elevations that you can see, this is some of the extras today. As you start to look at the buildings. Or the architects in Ed. Peter Schubert, myself, Melissa Sarko. I'm so glad you asked. The elevations, the east and west. And then as you start to look, you can start to see how it engages the park or the entrance to a new gateway into South Bellevue, which is going to be very exciting because right now it's harder and less easy to get to, and this will actually provide retail all along that corridor as you go into South Bellevue Park. So the pedestrian experience. You want to go this?
Sure, I'll just go through some of the basics. I mean, the site itself on the First Avenue and Hilton Sciences Corridor is well served by public transportation. There's a robust bus network. The 405 campus is located to the west, so there's a lot of cross moving of people coming from farther west and then moving, especially along the First Avenue corridor. Highlighted in the blue dash are pedestrian walkways, which is somewhat unique to this particular sector. So there are some streets that are designated as pedestrian ways that we want to talk about in a bit more detail as well. So especially on 27th Street, which is a pedestrian way, has an axial relationship to Bellevue South Park and is a kind of a critical connector from the residences to the west for people moving through the park, which was recently and beautifully renovated along the 27th Street pedestrian way to First Avenue. So really engaging that residential community in the First Avenue Health and Sciences sector. And that drove a lot of our planning of the ground floor, in addition to comments that we've been receiving from our outreach and from the PDC. So the ground floor plan has a centrally located lobby for the building tenants on First Avenue, but it's flanked on either side with a retail cafe supporting the neighborhood, which has kind of a lack of food options in this particular sector. That's at the north corner of the site, fronting on 27th Street, which is the pedestrian way, so the retail can spill out onto 27th Street and activate it. There's a life science multi-purpose space planned at the opposite corner on 26th Street, which has the ability to have flexible meeting and program space to support the life science community. And there's a bike room for the building, which has been relocated to 27th Street so that we can capitalize on the ability to add some transparency to that facade and allow there to be some, sense of movement and activation, which will be a big change from the current conditions.
I'm Susan Rinal. I lead the life sciences team for New York City multiple support for this project. Unfortunately, it's running so over running. But if there are any questions that need to come our way, please send them. Happy to answer any of them. You say that Sue Rosenthal. I lead the life sciences team at the New York City Economic Development. They really fascinating. I just wanted to be here for any questions that they came up with. They're so far behind. I can't miss the next thing. Thank you.
So a quick view again of the. Are you feeling like the transparency and activation of the facade? Points of entry. So we are planning for multiple points of entry on 27th Street. We'll include 2 points of entry for the retail cafe and the bike room. On the south will be dedicated multi-purpose entrances with the main building entry for the tenants on First Avenue with connection along the entire floor plate. So this is the ground floor plan. You want to talk?
Yeah, and it's just an elaboration on what Melissa already spoke to, but we tried to get as much transparency around the building as possible. life science buildings are very loading intensive and they're also very mechanical intensive. So we were able to put it probably in the least trafficked areas. I think the big news here really is the ability to get the corridor at 27th Street with a beautiful sort of now tree line and transparent walled connection between First Avenue and South Bellevue. Well, there's mechanical floors, and we'll get to a section again, but most of the mechanicals go on the roof. But there is quite a
Yeah, we've specifically moved anything critical, pretty much all the mechanicals out of the basement. So we do have, you know, all the electrical transformer belts are raised up onto the second floor, and then there's a number of like pieces of critical infrastructure also located here on the ground.
Yeah, so it's first and second floor primarily, but you're right, everything's above grade now. There is no basement to this building. And I wanted to also say that the lobby in the middle of the building also defers to the sort of the northeast corner, southeast corner. And there you'll have what I call science on display, which I think is very exciting part of the emerging innovation sort of centers and districts and buildings throughout New York, is that we're really putting the sort of the conference room and some of the exhibition spaces right on that corner. So there'll be a participant in the neighborhood, and there'll also be the neighbor would also be a participant in what goes on in the building. And then on the upper left, you can see where the bike room is also part of the sustainable component, so that really the whole ground floor becomes kind of a teaching environment. As you enter from First Avenue, we've been able to get the entries at grade on 26th and 27th. There's a 21 plus 21 sort of lobby level that now goes and stretches across the building. It does suggest stairways, however, on First Avenue, but ramps aligning.
There's an 8-foot grade differential between the two corners of the building, and then about a 5-foot grade at the points of entrance that we're supporting public or tenant activity. So that is, I know that's been a series of comments that we've gotten about that, and I'm happy to talk to you about it.
And again, along the 27th Street corridor now, that retail will sort of animate the street. They'll be transparent, but there'll also be a retail environment that's welcome to the neighborhood as well as the interior of the building.
Quick comparison regarding loading docks and their location. On the left are the points of loading and vehicular access in the existing building. We are consolidating our loading docks to Mount Carmel Place, which is a wide one-way street, which can support that activity without having an impact on either the pedestrian traffic or the vehicular traffic and the surrounding road network. And we did look at, you know, the pros and cons of locating a loading docks on Mount Carmel versus 126, and we felt strongly that they are appropriately located on the Carmel Place. A couple of before and after photos. So existing conditions on Mount Carmel, which does have the loading, I think will still be an improved condition based on the points of vehicular access and the transparency that we still get at the corners because of the bike room. 27th Street existing conditions are important to just acknowledge. On the east side of 27th Street, there's a very active city bike array, separated by a fence, and on the west side, there is an area that is intermittently parked with, there's a lot of illegally parked cars there. And so the project team plans to work with the city to make sure that those cars are removed and that they are located there. There is an active vehicular access point mid-block that serves the Nitro residences, so that one is uniquely to go with some particular traffic that continues along 27th Street. And then there are, one of these photos shows the coffee shop that's on the north side of 27th Street, has some cafe tables that are occasionally out on 27th Street, which, and it just shows the promise of the street to have activation and to support pedestrian activity. So our project intends to build upon that. And restoring 27th Street and enhancing its activation and its safety will support this network of open space that goes from the residential community through Bellevue South Park across 27th Street to the First Avenue Health and Sciences corridor, and then with the planned Spark project, we'll continue farther east with enhanced pedestrian connections to the riverfront. Few additional existing and proposed views of the current conditions, which we understand from the community. There are safety concerns just because of the extent of scaffolding and it's dark and has hasn't really been kept up. With this project, we intend to have very transparent, well-lit facades, and the activation will make a tremendous difference. An additional view of the end of 27th Street at Bellevue South Park with the bike room. And then some elevations just showing the transparency. At the top is the 27th Street facade. You can also see some of the topography where it feels very flat, but it's actually sloping along 27th Street. Opposite that on the bottom is the 26th Street elevation, which is primarily the frontage of the life science multi-purpose space. At the top, we have the First Avenue elevation showing the central entrance, which responds to the centrally located core of the building. And then at the bottom is the Mount Carmel Place elevation, which has some transparency on the north side where the bike room is, and then the building next. The timeline is contingent on the public health lab being relocated and opened in Harlem, which is intended to be 26. So that would be the point in time when demolition could start and construction could begin.
Is your presentation complete?
That's what we can.
Okay, I wasn't meaning to
That's a
rush you.
question.
Yeah, I had a question. I have, just for my fellow commissioners, I have a question about this project and then I need to leave and Jimmy's going to take over and lead for the last project. Regarding the entry on, can you go back to the elevation of 27th Street, please? Yeah. I actually, that one. Yeah, yes. I'm wondering about the entry there. You have, I see by the, in this drawing that there's an entry to the bike room and to the food and beverage retail. Is there an entrance into the core there so that if I'm, let's say, having a bite on that pedestrian street and then I want to go up to work, can I do that without walking around the building?
Not at this time. I mean, I'm assuming that tenants who have access to the bike room have a badge where they could access the building, but I don't think the intention is that visitors or that it's a primary entrance to the facility.
There's a secondary entrance,
So yeah, I'm just wondering because when we looked at this before, when you all were with us, it seemed to us that there would be a great deal of like social infrastructure in place there on that 27th Street, and that forcing people who work in the building to go around the block to enter their workplace seem inconsistent with that desire.
Sure.
So just something for you all to consider to add another proper entry here. And I know that that's probably a security issue vis-a-vis the rest of the building, but I think something to consider because there's a dissonance there, like the welcoming kind of area, the plaza of 27th Street, and then you have to go somewhere else to go in, even though it's right there, right? So that's all I have to say about that. And I'm going to.
Yeah.
Other comments, questions from commissioners?
Let's see if this is working. Hi, thanks. Great. Thanks so much. Enjoy your work. So I had a question I was trying to understand because I know on First Avenue side on the elevation, you have this bilateral symmetry on the building. Yeah.
Full block building.
Full block building, bilateral symmetry means door in the middle, equal, right? And it's the people, you've been getting comments about, why can't you open the corner? Why can't you lift it up? And, I understand the difficulty with that because the entrance is in the middle, right? So your response that, well, but the entrance is in the middle. What can I do over here, right? So I'm sympathetic to that. And I understand the lock-in with those lab floors. I completely understand that. It's a very fixed dimension. It doesn't give, right? It's given the program. This is like not a flexible program. So, but I'm just confused about the lab science multi-purpose, because I don't know if I'm misremembering, but I feel like I saw something marked on a plan, and I don't have my iPad showing me this, but that corner was a community space. It was marked, am I dreaming? It was once a community space on the corner of 26. pardon, inside that yellow business.
The program.
The program. Am I dreaming about that? I thought it was, I thought that at one point,
Multi-purpose, yeah.
it's multi-purpose, and now I understand it's lab science multi-purpose. And I don't know if I just dreamt this or I was hoping it was the case, that the community was able to use that space somehow. What's the story on that? You thought so too? Yeah.
Now, who are you?
Ms. Ben Bakash, I'm here on behalf of 455 First Avenue Associates. I'm an employee of Taconic Partners, one of the co-developers of the project. Sure. Sure. My name is Ben Bakash. I'm here on behalf of Taconic Partners. We're one of the co-developers.
Okay.
So the life science multi-purpose space,
Charlie Bennett.
Charlie Bennett is my boss.
My.
Great guy. So it is a tenant amenity space, but we will be having scheduled public events. We're looking to develop impactful opportunities to bring the public indoors and expose them to the life sciences field.
In that very space.
In that
yellow-
space.
That yellow space.
Right.
And maybe even the big space, the meeting room, maybe.
That's right. We're thinking things like
There, and you enter there, yeah. Because I was wondering about the security, because then I kept reading this and it said, well, no, there's security. The security is gonna be before.
Sure,
go
so you
in,
could,
right?
you
Because
could
You're
enter,
gonna have security in the middle of the block
you could
there.
enter here, or you could
Ah,
enter here
okay.
and here, depending.
I
So
don't
it's
see a
flexible.
door there, though. There's no door where you just pointed.
There's a door here.
No, the middle.
There's a door from the lobby
There?
inside.
Oh, in there. I can't go in through the lobby.
You could potentially,
foyer,
depending on
into
how
the
the programs are
foyer.
gonna function,
I
not
mean,
from the vestibule. no.
Not from the vestibule, because, and what I read in here was that, and maybe I'm confused, that because there's a lot of security in a building like this,
Sure.
right? I understand that. Where is that?
Where's
I
this-
know we're not, I know that we're not supposed to be involved with the interior, but I'm
No, it's
interested
helped
in
you
the
understand.
public, how the
So
public-
this is the lobby desk.
Yeah.
And then we have turnstiles here.
Okay, they're back there. Okay. So you could come in there and then you could go to the cafe, or you could go into your community event if there was something going on or some kind of educational thing.
That's right.
Okay. And you'll be able to look into that from the outside.
Yes.
Like lobbies in New York are typically public. You go in.
Yeah.
If you have business there.
Well, they're not all typical anymore. They're all over the place. Like security now is all over the place, right? Sometimes you're
right.
stopped right at the door and, like in the NYU downtown at Trinity. There's like there's nothing, you kind of go in and then you can kind of get it.
So the layout is flexible such that this door would be usable or these two, depending on the type of event, how it made most sense.
We still use cluster locations based on our system.
Well, right here, actually. Yep. Yep.
Any other
That's it
comments,
for me.
questions? Nope.
I'll address it.
49 maybe. That. Behind the scaffolding, there's something kind of sticking in, that's not public, existing public art or sculpture, is it? What is that?
There is an existing culture there.
There is. What happens to that?
Something that we're working with the city to, EDC, to determine what should happen. That's a future story.
I can respond to that. I would work on this and say, me, I handle those, public market and you work with UBC. So we're currently investigating possible other sites in the life science area to relocate it.
No decisions have been made yet, but as soon as there is one, I certainly will be bringing that relocation package to the commission.
Okay, thank you, Gail.
Sure.
Just have a couple more questions or comments. First off, I want to thank you for being receptive to relocating some of the programs along, I forget the name, the 27th Street. Because I think, our main concern was to ensure that we don't miss out on the opportunity of this mostly pedestrian street, and that there are programs that activate that phase and bring activity upward. So I see that you have been receptive. I'm curious about something you said in your presentation, which is that this street is still has vehicular access.
It does today. I mean, it's not every day, but depending on the day, maybe it's related to street cleaning rules or something, but there are cars that will park on 27th Street access from them from local.
And is there, first of all, is it within your scope of work to renovate this street? And is there an interest? No.
It's not within our project.
It's
something
not-
We see it as a benefit, with the increase in transparency of lighting, so it's going to materially change. It's a nice experience, but it's not within our.
Got it. Okay. So I think moving forward, it would be very helpful to in plan identify where is your scope of work boundary. Because the way this is presented, it makes it feel like you are renovating this space. And I think the character of how we review the building really changes if you're not. Just, thank you.
So just to be clear, what we see on the left, those cars could still be there on the right.
Yes.
The cars that are on the left, they could still,
I mean.
because they're not sure, it looks very different on the
Yeah,
right.
the cars are technically not within our property line, so if the city were to continue to allow them to park there, it's nothing we could control, right, as the future controllers of the site. But we see value in working with the city to try to get them to not allow that. It's an opportunity. And certainly having a more transparent facade there is going to make that feel a lot less forgotten, a lot more activated and interesting.
Would be to our benefit.
To everybody's benefit, the community's.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two aspects of it. One, is there a way to work with the city to avoid having those cars? Because if those cars are able to park there, all of your vision for what happens on the street frontage really changes. And I don't know to what extent there's benefit in having a transparent bike room looking at the back of cars, right? I mean, the cars are obscuring the view, et cetera, et cetera. If you're not able to control that, my suggestion would be that you work within your property boundary to create a streetscape that can be flexible for when there are cars and no cars, meaning rather than having the cars back up against the face of the building and be something that visually may not be something you want for your tenants. Is there a way to create a buffer there that doesn't preclude the cars, but also thinks about the experience?
Also clarify that the cars that are parked there are illegally parked. This is mapped as a pedestrian way with no.
They're illegally parked?
They're illegally parked.
Okay. yeah.
This is an enforcement issue.
It's an enforcement issue. I don't think we want to accommodate cars there because they should be parked there. And I think that through strengthening that connection, it will hopefully discourage people from parking there and also increase the policing that happens to discourage.
I think it's just literally confusing for us to understand what is part of your project and your purview and what is not. And because it does ultimately really affect exactly what you're presenting to us. Understanding is not in your purview. I think we need a little more clarity on that.
Do you have a plan, the plan, yeah. Yeah.
Our property lines are the red line. So we don't have within our purview a buffer to work with. But right now, you know, the trees exist, the paving exists. Been upgraded already. Well, it's just now there's a lot of relief in market. Support.
But,
so
and
so
people.
that's not a problem.
It's a drive-through.
Yeah, and a lot of it is there. waiting.
Yeah. And then,
Those cars are actually where the blue is though, right? Yeah, okay.
so I guess that's a
Well,
question
the
back to
arrows up.
EDC. Is there a way to do something about this street to prevent that illegal parking and maybe have a better relationship between this building and the public realm?
Is there anybody online from EDC team that could respond? Jenna?
Would anyone from EDC like to raise their hand? I can unmute you. Okay, Betsy, I'm unmuting you.
Hi, this is Brandon from EDC. Yeah, so I know that Taconic is working with the city who was parking there illegally, and we are going to try to have them move and find a better location for those vehicles parking there.
Yeah, we'll be meeting with EDC and DOT to engage in this exact dialogue because it's very important. As a matter of design, though, we are relying on that not happening because like any other sidewalk in the city, to expect cars to park there is frankly not right, and they shouldn't be there in the first place. And it's a real opportunity to have a much more interesting frontage for the building.
Okay, so we are not actually voting this, but I just want to mention that the team will return with a plan for the relocation of the artwork as a separate submission to the PDC. The commission has jurisdiction over any work performed on the art. Eagle Eye, Bill, thank you for spotting that. I did not see that on that. And then obviously there are lots of questions about vehicular access on 27th Street, lots of work being done with that. Sounds like lots of folks are in on that. And Deborah started with the discussion of a proper entry, more welcoming plaza on 27th as well. And there was a note about the possibility of celebrating and distinguishing this area volumetrically at the corner from the rest of the building to share with the vision with the Spark master plan.
Well, currently the building is very much an avenue building, full block building. There's, it's very much extended to the core building. Key to life science building are flexibilities at the bottom. And it varies that whole environment, which helps very consistent. So in order to do something volumetric, it would be a detriment of lighting perhaps of the building and also the facade itself. Water maker building. New York prototype in my view at least is very much about an overall response to an avenue, particularly when it's a full block building. And then at the ground floor, you very much enjoy transparency, and in this case, big connection to Spark Trails will be the sort of community development like science story. Very transparent facade that will be organized adjacent to the lobby. It'll also be very high for the ceiling and the ground because basically for its more publicness, but also because of
right. Appreciate all of that. And when you return, I'm sure there'll be ongoing discussions between now and then. Any other comments before we move on to the last item on the agenda? Thank you all very much. Okay, our next and last committee meeting is the conceptual review of the construction of the Queensway Metropolitan Hub, including construction of a pedestrian bridge over the Long Island Railroad at Forest Hills in the Great Borough of Queens.
Yeah, I see. Thank you to everyone.
I live here.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready to? So as they're all getting mic'd up, commissioners, just a reminder, we will not hear public testimony or further vote on this project today. But we are ready for the presentation when you are ready. Go.
Good. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mitchell Loring. I'm a project administrator at New York City Parks. We're joined here today with EDC and our consultant team, Techno Sasaki, to give a presentation on the conceptual design for Queensway Metropolitan Hub. I'm just going to give a quick intro and then Nick Shannon's going to run through the deck. The project site today is primarily city-owned decast land with small sections of DOE property and DOT right-of-way. The project site will be opened as a park following construction, and EDC is managing the design and construction for the project. Some important background about the Queensway. Excuse me. The Trust for Public Land led a robust community visioning process a few years ago, like 2013-14, with a local advocacy group, the Friends of the Queensway, that developed or resulted in a vision for this full Queensway corridor, a series of 6 connected linear parks stretching from Rego Park to Ozone Park in Queens, along the former Rockaway Beach Branch railroad line. which has been abandoned since the 60s. Mayor and City Council recognize that support, and in 2022, funding was allocated to advance the first section of those 6 project areas, the Metropolitan Hub. So the project today is just for this Met Hub area, which is between Metropolitan Avenue and Union Turnpike. But as we're doing this design, we're keeping the full vision in mind to ensure that the northern and southern terminus of our project can be adjusted in the future to allow continued extension of the project into the rest of the corridor.
For the railroad line owned by the city of New York? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
it's all city owned. And so in October, we provided a brief update on the project to Community Board 6. And in next week, we are having a community input meeting to get some ideas from the public about the amenities they'd like to see and some programming opportunities in a portion of our project site. So with that, I will turn it over to Nick.
Thanks, Mitchell. Hey everyone, I'm Nick Shannon. I'm a landscape architect at Sasaki, work on the Queensway project. This presentation was prepared with coordination with EDC and New York City Parks and Techno and Sasaki. Sasaki's a landscape architecture consultant. The overall goals of the Queensway are to create a new linear park and greenway with safe sort of and accessible trail networks for walking, biking, sort of pedestrian access, incorporating both active and passive recreation, and sort of engagement with adjacent facilities and providing new park amenities to people in the neighborhood and connecting to the adjacent forest park just to the south of our project site area. Some of the other goals are to provide outdoor learning environments for the adjacent school complex, and also to provide sort of a biodiverse and native planting palette, preserving the existing trees and sort of creating an immersive experience for park users. The Metropolitan Hub is, as Mitchell mentioned, is the first sort of section of the larger 3.5 mile long Queensway corridor that is being implemented right now. So we are sitting just north of Forest Park in Forest Hills, Queens, and we are sort of situated on a sort of a section of the park that is right next to the Metropolitan Expeditionary Learning School to the east, which consists of 3 schools, and then some larger sort of commercial uses on the west. This project will include, is about like 5 acres in size, and will, at the end of it, will include about a 1/2 mile long trail network. It's a pretty narrow site and linear site, as the rest of the Queensway corridor kind of imbues, and it's about 1,800 feet long and 130 feet wide at its sort of widest point. We have Metropolitan Ave to the north and Union Turnpike to the south that border sort of those sides of the site. And we also cross the Long Island Railroad Montauk line, which you can kind of see just north of the Little League field. Looking at sort of stormwater flooding around the site, our site currently in the moderate flooding doesn't experience sort of huge stormwater flooding risk. In the more extreme flooding, stormwater flooding, it is adjacent. So this is something we're accounting for as we sort of design sort of the accessible entry points to the site, making sure that we manage all the runoff, both within the boundary and any runoff that goes outside of the site. The adjacent land use, as I mentioned, is more commercial on the west side of the site. And then we do have a large DOE sort of campus of the schools that has high schools and middle school, 3 schools, and then some more commercial use on the east as you go further south across the Long Island Railroad, and more city-owned property on the west side, south of the railroad, that's currently subleased to a private Little League field. Looking at some of the neighborhood facilities adjacent to the site, we are just north of Forest Park. That is the largest open space in the neighborhood. So sort of expanding upon that and providing more connections to Forest Park is one of the main goals, and sort of providing new amenities for the neighborhood and connections in and out of the new space. There is a lack of current bike infrastructure around the site today. And we will be sort of doing our first sort of like piece of the shared use path with 2-way bike lane and pedestrian connections that will eventually connect all the way to Forest Park and the Brooklyn Queens Greenway, and then further north to larger Queens Boulevard bike networks in the future. This is the existing condition plan. These plans from moving forward now, north is on the left side. So we're kind of tilting the view right now. And you can see that the abandoned railroad used to run through the middle of the site. North of the Long Island Railroad, south of the Long Island Railroad on the right side of the page is currently an asphalt parking lot. That is, and this is all city-owned DCAS property. And looking at the sort of like analysis of sort of adjacent traffic and pedestrian flow conditions, Metropolitan Ave to the north and Union Turnpike on the south have more larger sort of vehicular flows. And the Mel's campus just on the east side of our site has a lot of pedestrian flow coming in and out, connecting to the bus stop, sort of kids coming in and out of that campus. And we'll be providing sort of new routes for those students to have safe routes to school. Looking at sort of the slope analysis too, you can see that north of the Long Island Railroad, we're working with a ridge condition. So we have a very steep sort of side slopes and a narrow strip where the railroad used to run on the top of the embankment on the ridge line. And that's where we'll be threading our new shared use path through with the proposed design, and also providing new accessible entry points on the east and the west and the north and the south. The parking lot area currently today is more flat. Some existing site photos starting in the north. The entry point to the Mel's campus and that driveway is on the left photo here. And then the new entry point to the shared use path adjacent to existing car wash building is on the right side of here of the page. Looking down along that west side along the car wash, as you go down Trotting Course Lane, you can see our sort of proposed that you'll see in the design, a new entry point there, sort of distinguishing the sort of ownership of city-owned land and the new park versus sort of the existing operations of that car wash. As you climb up the embankment, there's a lot of existing trees and new trees that have sort of grown up along the railroad over the past 60 years. So it's quite a amazing site to be working with this huge existing canopy. A lot of more of the native trees are on the steep side slopes that have sort of grown up since the railroad was in operation. And there's a lot of more invasive pioneer species. They just grew like that, yeah. Yeah, so we're really excited about sort of providing people access to this, because right now this whole site is sort of walled off and people aren't able to go in. As you on the southern point of the site, these pictures are looking at the axis of Union Turnpike. So on the left side, this is sort of an existing sort of drive entry that will be the new sort of entry of the shared use path. On the right, you can see that looking west. Union Turnpike goes down on the left side of that photo, and then this path goes up to meet the grade of where the new park area will be. As we go up that sort of driveway, there is a loading dock to existing commercial buildings on the right side. So we're managing this access and differentiating it and providing safe sort of entry points to the site with the proposed design.
The entire greenway?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 3.5 miles. So yeah, it connects 6 neighborhoods, and there's 12 schools along the whole corridor too. So the safe routes to school is one of the major goals. I forgot to mention that, so thanks for asking. And it goes.
Just so I understand, what's the governance structure of it? Who's going to maintain it? To me, this looks like a great opportunity to have something like they did. I'm really having a senior day today. Yes. The High Line. This is the Queen's version of the High Line. And you guys are probably not in charge of this, but Jimmy, you could be really helpful here. They should really get a governance structure that has private sector in Queens investing in this, maintaining it. I don't know if they're doing it or not, but it's like a missed opportunity for civic involvement.
Certainly a part of the master plan, right?
Certainly a part of the master plan. This project that we're talking about, just this first segment, when it opens, it'll be operated by Parks.
Interesting. But the idea.
Yes.
Made the High Line successful was, I went to the initial meeting, it was a little sliver of it. And then because of civic engagement, it just snowballed into this magnificent entity. And that's what you're creating. I just think you should do it. I don't live in Queens, but for the people.
Well,
who
I do, and Queens deserves nothing less than as high quality High Line as we can possibly get.
Thank you. We haven't gotten to the design yet. I'll go through these existing photos.
Yes, just so
Yeah.
you know, we love this. We love this project. Trust me, and I'm a Queens guy. I love this. This has been an exceptionally long meeting, so no disrespect, but I think if you could get to the
sure.
design
Yep.
portion, it'd just be great.
Yep, so this is our overall design. I'll kind of swipe through this pretty quickly, but the magenta line is showing our shared use path alignment. So we're setting it up to have sort of more interim conditions on the northern terminus with a temporary overlook structure, that when the rest of the corridor gets built and there's sort of funding and implementation sort of momentum going, it'll create a seamless connection to the north. Right now, we're having accessible connections all the way throughout the site, all the way going down to Union Turnpike, and have a larger expanded park program areas south of the Long Island Railroad, where we have a larger space to work with that's not the embankment condition. This is our shared use path sort of section, typical section. It's a 16-foot wide sort of strip of asphalt that has a two-way bike lane and pedestrian. This is determined by the width that we have to work with on the top of the ridge line of the embankment, which is a pretty narrow strip where the railroad used to run. On the northern side of the site, we're providing 3 new accessible entry points. One on the eastern side that connects from Metropolitan Ave, and there's also sort of the access to the Mel's campus on that side too, so a pretty direct adjacency over there. The new shared use path is between the car wash and the embankment on the western side, and then there's also a pedestrian access point further down south of the car wash building itself. This is a section along the car wash of the shared use path, and these are some sort of arrows of those over there, those site photos that show those conditions. So on the Mel's campus side, where the schools are, the sort of access to the sidewalk and the access to the Queensway are separated, but they both occur at the same point, indented into the that campus. There is a new pedestrian bridge proposed over the Long Island Railroad. So this provides a critical link for people to not have to walk along Woodhaven Boulevard to the west, and to provide that connection, safe connection from the school campus, from Metropolitan Ave, all the way down south to Forest Park and beyond to those neighborhoods. This is showing that section on the embankment that you can kind of start to get a sense of the steepness of those side slopes. And then the adjacency to the Mel's campus as well. The bridge has minimum 3-foot clearance on either side of the shared use path. So we're sort of working this in that path sort of weaves through, and the bridge sort of accommodates a new bridge where the old rail used to go. Today, there currently isn't a bridge that spans that. So we're sort of providing a new bridge to make that connection. On the south, we have 3 program areas and the shared use path that sort of weaves through the site and connects down to the Union Turnpike Drive, as seen in the other site photos. We're also setting up the southern portion of the site to be able to connect in the future to other crossings and providing a safe and accessible sort of path of travel for pedestrians to get south to Forest Park in this project. This is showing sort of the layout of the secondary pedestrian paths and also the main shared use path going through the site. And we are working with parks very closely to conform to all sort of like the park standards, but also sort of creating a unique identity for the Queensway site itself. Layering in native plantings and also controlling erosion. The embankment side slopes are pretty steep. So we're introducing sort of that sort of native ecosystem layer to provide more opportunities for an outdoor learning environment for the adjacent schools. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you. I just had one quick question. I know Commissioner Castillo has some questions. With the budget cuts, obviously, that everyone's sort of thinking about, worrying about, we're confident this is all gonna go forward and proceed, and
Funding is committed for this project.
great. Very exciting. That's great news. It's been a long time coming. Obviously, as a Queens resident, I don't live in that particular area of Queens, but of course, really love what you just showed us and thought it was really, really terrific. So, Commissioner Castillo.
Great. Thank you, guys. So I just have a number of questions that are a little bit beyond this presentation and just some suggestions. I mean, I've known of this project for a while. I know it is intended to be, this is intended to be part of a larger project, 3.5 miles. But I find it a little bit difficult to evaluate this project without understanding the overall context of the master plan or work that has been done to date and how this fits within that. And many questions come to my mind that maybe you can help answer. One is more about strategy. Why was this particular portion of the site selected in relationship to the 3.5 miles? Why is this the place where we're investing on our pilot project, let's say, and how is this going to expand in the future? The second is, what is, you just finished your presentation mentioning a distinctive design vocabulary that makes this, highlights this as a unique place. And because it is, right, spatially right now, it's a bit scruffy, but it's really unique. I don't see that yet on the presentation. And I also have a question about, is there a larger master plan that establishes a consistent design vocabulary? So as this project gets developed into various phases, there is still that sense of identity and continuity within the bounds of the Parks Department, standard materials and budget, right? Because all of these projects, linear projects, suffer from the challenge of one being built in phases, right? So it's important to establish that strong vocabulary so you don't lose it over time. But two, because they are built in remnant spaces within the city grid, if they don't have a strong design vocabulary, they could be misread as a remnant piece, a piece of a sidewalk, a random, bikeway that meanders through existing commercial spaces. And I think there's always so much value in figuring out strongly what is the identity of the site and how you can carry that through materiality and design choices. So as the project develops through future phases, it does feel like its own unique standalone place. So if you could answer just those two questions, I would like the bigger picture.
Sure. First, for the kind of strategy of why this segment was selected first, I think a big piece of it is the fact that the school campus is right there, and the ability for this new corridor being built to create a safer north-south connection for neighborhoods nearby to the campus, as opposed to Woodhaven, which is a big, busy, scary street. So that's a main one. It also helps.
Sorry, can you point in the plan, where is the campus and where are the those access points that you're mentioning in relationship?
This is the laser. Great. Here's the campus, kind of this triangular parcel here. The entrance points will be here, 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 and here. Woodhaven Boulevard runs parallel over here and is currently the only way that you can safely move north-south because you have to cross this Long Island Railroad cut.
So if you were on the campus, how do you get to the corridor?
There's a current campus drive entrance right here. And so we are working with the school to design an entrance to the park right there that's immediately adjacent to the school entrance.
Great.
That's the main reason why this segment was selected first, I would say, is this goal of creating safe routes to schools. It was part of the greater Queensway vision. And then your question about the kind of identity for this project and the full corridor. This is conceptual, so obviously we aren't into those unique identity type details yet, but appreciate the comment. And the full Queensway master plan vision definitely had design ideas that were identity and unique. And some of that work is making sure that what was planned in this visioning stage can actually be maintained and built by parks or EDC, city agencies who have to keep operating this over time. But there's definitely ideas in that vision plan that we will be able to draw from when we get to the point of detailed design to think about the entrances and what those look like and how people recognize when you're walking on the street that, oh, boom, there it is, entrance to this new Queensway corridor, whether you're up in Rego Park or further south. As those additional phases get built out, it'll be able to be used consistently throughout the different parcels.
Okay, I mean, I thank you for the answer. I think it's good to understand the relationship to the school. I would say it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity to not create a direct connection to Forest Park. That's right there, because this area just feels a little bit isolated. The school is there, but the embankment just makes it feel completely disconnected.
Sure.
So I think figuring out ways within the limits of the project, I understand there's always a set project limit and scope, to increase those connections so that this is truly used will be important. Because otherwise this may feel like, the beginning of something great, but as a pilot project, if it's not successful, it could actually not help the rest of the project. So I think we need to be really careful about thinking and making sure that the immediate community does feel invited. They do use it. I am very interested to hear from your community engagement coming up, what kinds of programs will be added here. And I'm sure that will also add another layer of information that will help us evaluate it better. From a design standpoint, I respectfully disagree with you. I think every project needs to have some sort of design vocabulary. Right now you have a path, an asphalt path, that is what every other project has. There's the standard parks materials, but we see a lot of successful parks projects that use those materials and have a design concept, a sense of creating space, identity, distinction. And I think it's critical that you think about that and concept design, because if not, the project could become purely practical. And that's really not something we want to do in New York City. We want to aspire to something else. The High Line was mentioned. This is very different from the High Line. But part of what gave the High Line its identity was the idea of borrowing from the site. And it was about borrowing the industrial materiality of the site. It was about incorporating the railroads. It was about understanding vistas and how the design and the layering of the path frame vistas, closed up vistas, and how vegetation as well helped with that journey. Every single few blocks of the High Line, the vegetation changes dramatically to give you that sense of space. And that is a design vocabulary, right? So that's what I'm looking for. And I would encourage you to think about in the future beyond, there's very strong practical and technical concerns here that I think you have resolved well conceptually in terms of the width of the path, how it sits on the embankment, where the connection points are. I encourage you guys to think about the next layer. There's railroad tracks there. Are they incorporated as part of this? Are they incorporated as part of the paving like the High Line, or are they removed and you create a unique artifact with them, gateways or something? Like, how can you borrow from the site and also think about the experience of that user to make it uniquely grounded here as opposed to, any other bikeway in New York City?
Okay, thank you. We'll take those into consideration.
In addition to all those great comments from Commissioner Castillo, why not connect to Forest Park? Is that like a conscious decision at this point, or cost?
There's more railroad bridges here over Union Turnpike. We're building a new bridge here with this project. And so this is 2 more that would need to be rehabbed or constructed new. And so as the commissioner stated, the scope has to end somewhere. For now, we're focusing here, but this has a crosswalk across Union Turnpike here that goes into a path that connects into Forest Park. And this area on the ramp is a portion of the project that we will be improving to read as more of your pedestrian access, bike access point up the ramp into the park. So we'll be working with DOT to figure out how to make sure that this whole end of the park go down the right of way, cross the right of way, and get into the path in the park can be all more legible with this first phase.
You have to cross Union Turnpike.
Yes, there's a stoplight there though.
Got it.
A design for the bridge, our bridge here, not at this conceptual stage yet, not a, except for the section that we showed in the presentation.
Great. Any other thoughts?
Just one thing Commissioner Deborah Martin would have liked to highlight is that fence. And Isabel, I know you also had comments about the fence being very tall and in such a narrow section, a bit oppressive. So if you just could speak to that.
This fence here on the bridge.
Yeah.
Nick, do you know the height restrictions?
So that right now is based off of the DOT and MTA bridge standards.
Actually all along the
Oh.
path, not just.
There is. So this is adjacent, there's a fence along this shared use path that's right adjacent to the car wash building. So that fence is meant to sort of distinguish the new property, the new park from sort of that building and that commercial use. But the main shared use path that runs along the top of the embankment will not have a fence along it. It will have, it will have a clearance buffer space on both sides. So we've carefully determined the width of the path to be able to accommodate that clearance zone, to have enough buffer space to not require a guardrail on the top of the embankment.
Those are representing light poles.
Light poles, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
That was confusing. I'm glad to hear there's no fence there. I think when it comes to the bridges, we know DOT bridges has very specific requirements because they don't want people throwing stuff down. But within those requirements, because this is a unique portion of the site where you are very compressed, it would be good to explore what kind of fence that feels light is still acceptable within DOT requirements. And I think there's a lot of precedents in New York City on pedestrian bridges and the High Line itself as well, where by understanding what DOT is looking for, designers have come up with creative solutions. So I would encourage you not to, just go with the heaviest fence, but understand what they're looking for in terms of not having projectiles and try to do something that's a little bit more human scale friendly.
Agreed.
Great. Thank you. And I hope that you will incorporate everything that Isabel said in this meeting before you come to us again. I felt like she was really fighting for Queens there for a great project for the folks. And obviously you heard about the distinctive design vocabulary. And I liked the aspirational tone of it all, the materiality of the site, borrowing from this rough gem that you've encountered, but that you can incorporate into something very special for the people of these neighborhoods. The High Line obviously is always referenced, and obviously we deserve something incredibly special in Queens, which you guys are gonna work on. The master plan was referenced obviously a few times, and then we would love it if you would respond to these comments before preliminary, right? If you could do that for us.
I think an interim submission.
Yeah. Okay. Sound good? All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. And with that, we are finally concluded for the day.